Chapter 82. Follow me, Vivian said straightforwardly after Ron handed over the money. Ron followed Vivian through the school gates and arrived at a spacious courtyard. Looking around, he saw diligent students everywhere. Many of them were reading books as they walked. On the grass, some magic major students were demonstrating magic. Not far from him, an archer was struggling to maintain an archery posture. Judging from his appearance, which was dripping with cold sweat, it was unknown how long he'd been practicing. Search for the latest updates here. This is amazing. This is the real campus. Ron's heart was filled with excitement. He'd come to this place countless times in his dreams, fantasizing that he would one day set foot on this campus. It would be best if he could do so as a mage. Now, his dream had finally come true, but it was a little different from his dreams. He'd stepped onto this campus as a necromancer. However, what made Ron feel strange was that when the students passed by Vivian, not only did they not show any respect for their teacher, but they instead showed disdain for their teacher. What was even stranger was that Vivian seemed to be used to it, and didn't even crease her brows. Vivian chatted cheerfully and wittily with Ron as she walked, as if there was no one else present. It was obvious that she was in a very good mood. Ron, from now on, I'm your teacher, and you're also the first batch of new students in the necromancy major. When you see a male senior, call him senior, and a female senior. Do you understand? I understand. Ron smiled and nodded. He was starting to like this teacher, who was only a few years older than him. He felt that she was like the big sister next door, approachable and amiable. At this time, a dignified voice traveled to Ron's ears. Vivian, your enrollment is over so soon? Who's behind you? Ron turned his head and saw a wretched old man with a grizzled beard walking towards him. Behind him was a fair-skinned youth. He wore a white magic robe and appeared to be in high spirits. His face seemed to be smiling, but it also didn't seem to be. It gave off a very fake feeling. It's Dean Dabbs. Vivian hurriedly bowed and said with a somewhat nervous expression, my enrollment is over. He's a freshman in the necromancy major. His name is Ron. Debussy was only the vice principal, but the principal was always elusive. He had been in charge of everything in the academy for a long time. Over time, the students and teachers had gotten used to calling him the principal. Debu was shocked. What? Necromancy major? Since when did the necromancy major recruit new students? Vivian, you didn't just randomly pick someone to make up the numbers, right? Vivian's face flushed red. She was a little embarrassed as she stammered. No. When I was about to go back, he suddenly came to sign up. I see. Debussy looked at Ron from head to toe and nodded. Ron, hurry up and bow to Dean Dabbs. Vivian said. Ron bowed solemnly and said, nice to meet you, Dean. Not bad. Debussy looked at Ron with a satisfied expression in his eyes. However, he then looked meaningfully at Vivian and said, teach him well. Yes, Dean, Vivian said in fear and trepidation. At this time, the fair-skinned man at the side butted in and said with a fake smile, Vivian, congratulations. It's been 3 years, and you've finally recruited a student. This is a good thing. When will us instructors go out for a few drinks and celebrate? Vivian's face turned ghastly white. This guy was congratulating her on the surface, but in reality, he was humiliating her in front of everyone. She was already used to this, but now he was humiliating her in front of her student. Sifri, how can you speak like that? How could Abu not hear the personal attacks in those words? His expression turned unpleasant. As the vice principal, he had to be impartial. Although that student was dispensable, there were some words that couldn't be said in public. Sifri acted as if he didn't hear anything. Vivian, you have to teach your student well. You should know that the necromancy major only has a year left. I think you know that the necromancy major will be canceled next year. Time is tight. If you don't teach well in the last year, Dean Dabbs will be very angry. Debussy frowned. Sifri, enough. There are students here. Sifri smiled and moved to the side as if nothing had happened. He didn't reply. He had finished what he wanted to say. Vivian was already trembling with anger. He had achieved his goal. Debussy sighed. Vivian, as instructors, even if we only have one student, we have to teach seriously. This is the responsibility of instructors. Although the necromancy major is weaker than the other majors, this situation can't be said to be your fault. Don't think too much about it. Just do your best to teach your student well. Yes, Dean Debussy. Vivian bit her lips and lowered her head. Debussy gently stroked Ron's head. Since you're here, learn well. Understand? Ron nodded. When he looked at Sifri, his eyes were already filled with anger. Sifri pretended not to see it. The narrow-minded him was already laughing sinisterly in his heart. You little brat who doesn't know what's good for you. I gave you a kind reminder, but you treat me with such an attitude? One day, you'll know my prowess. Sifri was an adept archmage, only a step away from the realm of Grand Magus. He was powerful and had an extremely high status in the school. Add to that his sunny and handsome appearance. Who knew how many ignorant young girls had thrown themselves at him? Over the years, he had been involved in many romantic affairs. In the end, it was the family behind him that settled everything for him. Vivian walked in front, not saying a word. Her black hair hung down loosely, covering her face and making it hard for others to see her expression. Ron followed closely behind her. After a while, Vivian suddenly stopped. Ron also stopped and asked with concern, "Instructor Vivian, what's wrong?" Vivian sighed and said slowly that Instructor Sifri had tried to woo me several times, but I know that he's a famous playboy in the school. Who knows how many female students have been charmed by him and have climbed into his bed. So I rejected him. Vivian seemed to be talking to herself as she slowly turned her head. Ron saw that her face revealed a sorrowful expression. He flew into a rage out of humiliation and harbored a grudge against me. That's why he said those words just now. Ron suddenly understood and nodded. Instructor Vivian, I understand. I won't be affected by his words. Vivian smiled sadly. Although he said a lot of nonsense, he was right about one thing. Next year, the school has already decided to abolish the necromancy major. Ah, Ron cried out involuntarily. How could this be? Vivian shook her head and said self-deprecatingly, I've been an instructor for 3 years, and you're the only student I've recruited this year. It's understandable that the school is disappointed. In other words, Ron, you only have 1 year to study at the Balavax Academy. 1 year to read pornographic novels. I don't think you'll be able to learn anything. How about this? Ron, I'll give you a choice. If you're willing to withdraw, I can refund your tuition fees. Vivian finished speaking and quietly looked at Ron, waiting to see what he would choose. She'd already given up anyway. If Ron voluntarily withdrew after a few months, she'd lose even more face. Ron lowered his head and thought to himself, Grandpa Homelin can teach me necromancy magic. As for other knowledge, I should be able to learn it in a year's time. He raised his head and looked seriously at Vivian. Instructor Vivian, I choose to stay. A trace of surprise appeared on Vivian's face. Really? Ron, you're still deciding to stay? Even if it's only for 1 year. Of course. Ron smiled and reached out to wipe his nose. Apart from you, where else can I learn necromancy magic in the whole continent? But necromancy magic isn't that powerful compared to other elements. Vivian nervously rubbed her hands and said, Ron, you really won't regret it? I won't regret it. Really? Really? Then let's pinky swear. I'll keep my word. 100 years, no changing it. Vivian revealed a rare, immature side. She was young, only 23 years old, and would occasionally reveal a childish expression. Pinky swear 100 years, no changing it. Ron also stretched out his finger and shook hers. All right. Vivian smiled and took out a completed form. You can go back to the dormitory first. Take this form, and the dormitory administrator will arrange a place for you according to your age and occupation. Oh, Ron took the form in Vivian's hands and scratched his head. His basic information was written on the form, such as name, gender, age, and occupation. It was also stamped with a bright red seal. I'm leaving. If there's anything, find me at the instructor's dormitory. Vivian said and turned to leave. Ron took the form and walked to the place Vivian pointed to. I'm back. Vivian returned to the instructor's dormitory. This was the residence that the Balarax Academy arranged for the instructors of their occupations. However, Vivian's place was relatively simple and crude compared to other instructors. My Vivian is back. An old man with white hair came out to greet her, holding a soup bowl in his hand that was emitting traces of steam. He looked like Vivian's grandfather, but he was actually her father. Vivian's father, Jared, was also a necromancer who had been researching necromancy for decades. He was one of the people who believed in the existence of ancient necromancy. Influenced by her father, Vivian also embarked on the path of necromancy. When her father retired due to health reasons, she took the position of instructor of necromancy. "Vivian, how was the enrollment today?" Jared asked with a smile. Just as he opened his mouth, he realized that he had asked a stupid question. He couldn't help but slap his own mouth. What was there to be happy about? The necromancy major couldn't recruit anyone at all. Looking at Vivian, Jared felt a little regretful. This child had a strong interest in necromancy since she was young. The father and daughter almost quarreled because of this. Jared thought that if he had persisted a little longer, Vivian might have changed her mind. Even becoming a thief was better than being a useless necromancer. It was very smooth. Vivian's face revealed a rare smile. "Father, let me tell you a piece of good news. I recruited a student today." Chapter 83. The dormitory of the Barlowax Academy was an ancient building. It was simple but elegant, and the rotten wooden stakes on the edges showed that it had been there for some time. Ron walked to the door of the dormitory management office and knocked. "Search for the latest updates here. Come in." A voice came from behind the door. Ron walked in. The furnishings of the office were simple. There was a carved desk, and an old woman with white hair and a thin face was sitting there writing something. When she saw Ron come in, she didn't raise her head and said, "What do you want?" "Hello, my name is Ron. I'm a new student. May I know which dormitory I'll be staying in?" Ron replied, carefully handing over the form. "Oh, a new student." The old woman raised her head, and her tone softened. Ron then noticed that she was wearing glasses. The old woman took the form from Ron and looked at it for a while. Then she frowned. "Necromancer?" Yes," Ron replied. The old woman rubbed her hands. "This isn't good. What's wrong?" Ron asked nervously, afraid that the other party would refuse. "Nothing. Our academy hasn't had a necromancer study here for a long time. Now that one has suddenly appeared, it's hard to arrange." The old woman rubbed her eyebrows as she looked at the form. She raised her head. "Ron, our dormitories are divided according to the profession of a standard combat team. A dormitory has 8 people, and men and women each have a single room. They are mainly divided into defensive, offensive, control, and logistical professions. For example, defensive professions are knights, offensive professions are swordsmen, thieves, and magicians, and logistical professions are priests. You're a necromancer. To be honest, I don't know which profession to put you in." Ron was stunned. He didn't think that it would be so troublesome to arrange a dormitory, and there were so many requirements for the profession. "Grandpa Homelin, where should I be categorized as a necromancer?" Ron had no choice but to ask Homelin for advice. Homelin scratched his head. "I don't know. In our era, there is no such classification, but according to their classification, it seems that they exist to hunt exotic beasts. So, necromancers should be categorized as magicians, right?" Ron thought for a moment, then said to the old woman, Well, any kind is fine. I just want a place to stay." The old woman thought for a moment. "Since you don't have any requirements, go to room 302. The people there shouldn't reject you too much. A dormitory was actually a standard configuration for a combat squad. If a combat squad member was dissatisfied, they could suggest a replacement and ask the unsuitable member to leave the dormitory. In order to preserve the combat squad strength, the dormitory administrator would usually consider carefully. That was how room 302 came to be. It was a place known as the garbage shelter, and the people who lived there were the types of people who weren't welcome in the various dormitories. Ron naturally didn't know about these things. He had never had any requirements when it came to living conditions, so he readily agreed. "All right, room 302 it is." It doesn't matter if the living conditions are a little worse. You've lost. You've lost. Fatty, pay up. In the noisy room 302, a woman was shouting exaggeratedly. She had a head of fiery, red, curly hair, and her long hair hung loosely over her adorable face. Her slender, jade-like hand was twisting a fatty's ear. The fatty was in so much pain that his teeth were clenched and his mouth was cracked open. There were a total of 4 people in room 302, 2 men and 2 women. They were sitting at a small desk, playing a game called Winner is King. This was a popular tabletop poker game on the Noah continent. Many people could play, but there could only be one winner in the end. There were a dozen or so gold coins on the table, and a pile of silver coins scattered around. Needless to say, these guys were gambling. Room 302 was a 3-room dormitory. The dormitory was divided into male and female rooms, each with a bathroom and bathroom. In the middle was a small hall for public use. The entire dormitory was about 80 square meters, and a total of 8 people made up room 302. Nowadays, mixed dormitories were popular across the continent. It was said that a long time ago, male and female dormitories were separated. Later on, they became combat squads. 8 people formed a combat squad, regardless of gender. Mixed dormitories helped to foster tacit understanding in combat. Of course, it also facilitated communication between male and female students. It was very common for students in the same dormitory to become lovers. Just as the group of people were happily gambling, the door in the room opened with a creak. A woman walked out of the door. Her beautiful eyes were frosty, and she looked extremely unfriendly. So noisy. School has only started a few days ago, and you guys are already gambling here every day. Can't you guys stop for a while? After being scolded by the woman, the few of them lowered their heads, not daring to reply. Only the fatty chuckled and said, "Aurora, school has only started a few days ago, and classes haven't started yet. It's no big deal for us bros to play cards, but when classes start in a few days, we won't be able to play anymore, even if we want to." The girl called Aurora snorted coldly. "I say, you guys only think about playing and playing all day long. Don't you ever think about improving your strength? It's because of you guys that were dragging me down that our room 302 is called a camp for losers." The few of them were red in the face from the scolding. The red-haired girl lowered her head, her face red. It was for no other reason than the fact that among these people, that girl called Aurora was the strongest. No one in room 302 dared to refute her. Only the fatty was unconcerned. What camp for losers? They can call us whatever they want. It's not like we can control what other people say, right? Anyway, I didn't come to this lousy school to improve my strength. Otherwise, why would I have chosen such a coquettish thief? Ha! Although Aurora was fierce, there was nothing she could do about this fatty who did not seek to improve himself. She said exasperatedly, "You guys can do whatever you want, just don't disturb my rest." At this moment, Aurora frowned, and her ears twitched. "Sounds like someone's coming." "Someone's coming? Could it be that Missy has returned?" The red-haired girl exclaimed in surprise. The Missy she was referring to was also a roommate of room 302, but she had been away for a long time. A good 8-man combat team had been reduced to 7, indicating that they were not strong enough. It was not without reason that they were called a camp for losers. "It's not her. It's someone else." At the mention of the Missy, Aurora's eyes flashed with disgust. Then who could it be? Could it be a new student? The red-haired girl asked. The fatty, on the other hand, was delighted. "It could be a pretty chick." "In your dreams." The red-haired girl could not help but roll her eyes at him. At this moment, the fatty suddenly jumped up. "Quick, quick! Place your bets. Open the bet. 5 gold coins. Quick! I bet it's a girl." Before the others could say anything, Aurora snorted coldly. "Bet, bet, bet. All you think about is gambling. Let me tell you, you're going to lose. 305, 304, 303, 302. It's here." Ron looked at the door plate, held the key the old woman had given him, and reached out to open the door to room 302. As soon as Ron stepped through the door, he was stunned to see 5 surprised gazes directed at him. You, hello." Ron stuttered as he greeted them. "Oh my God!" The fatty, seeing Ron, immediately howled. "I lost 20 gold coins in one go. Hee, pay up, pay up." When the others saw this, they immediately beamed with joy. Only Aurora stood still. Ron, seeing this, was also stunned. What's going on?" A red-haired girl stood up and said, "Hee, we were just betting whether the person who came in was a man or a woman. Hee, thanks to you, we won the fatty's money." This. Ron heard this and sweated profusely. How could this be bet? The fatty, with a bitter face, walked to Ron's side, reached out, and patted his shoulder. Brother, why aren't you a woman? You made me lose 20 gold coins." As he said this, he began to complain with tears and snot. Ron said, "I'm really sorry about this. How about I pay for it?" He remembered that he still had a few dozen gold coins and hurriedly said this. The fatty, hearing this, perked up. "Brother, are you serious?" "Don't listen to him," the red-haired girl said with a smile. "This guy has a lot of money. He's just pretending." The fatty, hearing this, got up unwillingly. "Manny, why do you always expose me?" As he said this, he also laughed and patted Ron's shoulder. "Brother, I'm sorry. I was just joking with you." "That's good." Ron secretly sighed in relief. If he took out another 20 gold coins, he really wouldn't have any money left. "You're assigned to room 302, right? All right, what's your name?" The fatty, who was very friendly, patted Ron's shoulder and asked. "I'm Ron." Ron replied with a smile. He looked at the people in the dormitory, thinking that these people would be his roommates from now on. He nodded to them one by one. At least they could be considered acquaintances. "Hey, Ron, nice to meet you," the fatty said with a smile. Come. Let me introduce you. First, let's talk about this person. Lantry, he's a knight. Unfortunately, as a knight, he doesn't have a horse." The fatty vividly introduced, so his nickname is No Horse. Lantry's face turned red when he heard this. "Who are you calling No Horse?" "And this is a famous magician of the earth element. Her name is Karachi," the fatty said. "Hello, Ron." The pretty girl stood up and saluted with a red face. Ron noticed from the corner of his eye that the girl's pants seemed to be patched. "I have to say, this is the fire element swordswoman, Manny. She's a beauty," the fatty said with a smile. Manny gave Ron a coquettish look, stood up, and gently bent over, revealing her deep cleavage. She had a charming smile on her face. "Welcome, Ron." Ron's face also flushed red to the tips of his ears. Hello, Manny. As for this one," the fatty laughed, and then continued to talk to Aurora. "She's the boss of our dormitory, the famous god of archery, Aurora. She's also the strongest in our dormitory. She's young, but she's already obtained the title of advanced archer. As for me," the fatty laughed, the fat on his face trembling a few times. "I'm the strongest thief known as the future god of killing. Kid." Ron's eyes widened when he heard this. "Thief? You?" He looked at Kid's body, which was so fat that his muscles couldn't be put down, and was in awe. Chapter 84. Ron. Actually, this fatty has another name. The horseless knight, Lantry, said with a wink. Fatty panicked when he heard that. "You're not allowed to say it," Lantry continued. "This guy's the seventh in the family. When he first came, we called him seventh brother. Now we call him second fifth brother." Ron was puzzled. "Why second fifth brother? 2 + 5 = 7. Lantry clapped his hands and laughed. Karachi covered her mouth and laughed. "No, it's because he's a little, Everyone laughed when they heard that. Even Aurora, who was always serious, had a smile on her face. "Don't laugh." The fatty jumped up and rushed toward Lantry. Everyone laughed even harder. Aurora quickly stopped laughing. She looked at Ron and asked, "You're Ron? What's your class? How strong are you?" "My class?" Ron scratched his head. I'm a necromancer." "Necromancer?" When everyone heard this, they were first shocked, then their faces showed disappointment. Aoprola, however, frowned and sighed. It's okay. At this time, the fatty and second fifth brother comforted Ron. "Isn't it just a necromancer?" Now our trash concentration camp is even more deserving of its name. Ron was shocked. Trash camp? What's going on here? After Kid's explanation, Ron finally understood the origin of Trash Concentration Middle School. Kid was a fat bandit. He had been in the academy for 3 years, but he was only an apprentice intermediate bandit. If it weren't for his family's wealth, the academy would have kicked him out long ago. The Horseless Knight, Lantry, and Karachi were a pair of siblings. They came from a commoner family, but they chose the most expensive class. One was a knight, and the other was a magician. Lantry could not afford a horse, and even if he did, he could not afford to raise one. A knight with a mount could increase his strength by 30%, but without a mount, he was even weaker than a warrior. Karachi was the same. All the money she had was enough to buy a white staff of the lowest level. Without strength, they became a burden to the other battle groups, so they were sent here. As for Manny, she was sent here because she had offended a certain teacher in the academy. She had never mentioned the specific reason. Aurora, on the other hand, was extremely strong. She was sent here because she had a conflict with a teacher in the academy. She, who was so strong, had seriously injured the teacher. The academy was furious and sent her here. There was also a rich young lady, Lucia, who was rarely seen in the dormitory. Every year, her housekeeper would come to pay her tuition fees on time, but she rarely went to school. Even her roommates rarely saw her. There were a total of 6 people in dormitory 302. Except for Lucia, there were only 5 left. Among them, the fat bandit, second fifth brother, could be ignored. He was a bandit, but he fought like a warrior. In every competition, he was the first to die. Therefore, in addition to the title of the fattest bandit in history, he also had the title of the fastest bandit to die in history. The Horseless Knight, Lantry, and the poorly equipped mage junior sister, Karachi, had their strength greatly reduced in battle. They almost all relied on Manny and Aurora to hold the line. Manny was a warrior, and her strength was not bad. However, there were only 6 people in dormitory 302. Other than the 4 who couldn't fight, only Manny and Aurora were left. Even if Aurora had the strength of a super genius, she couldn't do anything about it. In the end, she was defeated. Therefore, Aurora attached great importance to Ron's strength. However, when she heard him say that he was a necromancer, she couldn't hide the disappointment on her face. She couldn't help but laugh at herself. If he was a genius, how could he have been sent to dormitory 302? Ron didn't care about this. He came here to learn and broaden his horizons. His goal wasn't to be number 1 in the academy. The academy library was the place he wanted to go the most. They were all young people, so Ron quickly became familiar with them. These people didn't show any obvious hostility towards Ron's arrival. They were all people from the trash camp, so there was no need to talk about each other. Ron learned from the conversation that these people were all repeaters of Balrog's academy. The oldest, Fatty Gid, had been at the academy for 3 years. The youngest had been at the academy for a year. According to him, he came to this academy to study for his father. Just then, the door creaked open, and a head popped out. It was a youth about the same age as them. He had short blue hair, wore glasses, and had a cultured look. "Excuse me, is this dormitory 302? The fat man whistled as he said, "Hey, I'm not going anywhere." "Another freshman. What day is it today? Did all the freshmen rush here?" The youth seemed a little embarrassed. He slowly walked in, his pure white cleric robes extremely dazzling. A cleric? Apart from Ron, everyone's eyes widened. They looked at the shy youth in front of them in disbelief. The Balrog's Academy's dormitory management was too awesome. They actually assigned a cleric to dormitory 302. One had to know this was a rare resource. Could it be that he committed some crime and was kicked out? A huge question mark appeared above the heads of those few. My name is Rum. I'm a cleric." The youth called Rum stuttered. "Huh, brother, we'll be relying on you to protect us from now on." The fatty quickly ran over and stretched out his hand to press down on the seemingly thin and weak youth. His personality as a friendly person was displayed vividly. Look, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It turns out that a cleric really came to our dormitory. Aurora's face also floated up with a smile. This is great. Our dormitory's strength has risen to a new level. A cleric was the most powerful profession in the support class. One had to know that not every combat group had a cleric. Seeing everyone's somewhat expectant gazes, Rum's face turned even redder. He knew that this dormitory had high expectations for a cleric, but he himself knew that he wasn't a qualified cleric. He didn't know why, but every time he was nervous, Rum's mind would become blank. He couldn't remember any spells. It wasn't a problem usually, but in battle, if he didn't use healing spells in time, it would be extremely fatal. When Rum was nervous, he would drop the ball. Because of this, he was scolded by his roommates. In the end, his roommates couldn't take it anymore and voted to kick him out of the dormitory. He was assigned to dormitory 302. No, but I'm not a freshman, Rum said with a red face. I was originally from dormitory 818, but I was kicked out. As he spoke, he didn't hide anything from everyone. He told them about how his mind would go blank when he was nervous. After telling them about the matter, he finally sighed and said, I don't know why I'm like this. Usually, when I'm practicing, nothing happens. But when it comes to battle, it's like I have amnesia. I can't remember anything. But when the battle is over, my healing spells will be fine. Everyone was speechless. The battle was over. Why would they still need a cleric? Aurora's lips tightened, and the joy on her beautiful face gradually turned to disappointment. She sighed slightly in her heart and said, Now there are 2 more people in dormitory 302. How about this? I think we should sit down and strengthen each other's understanding. Let's see if there's any chance in the future ranking battles. Everyone agreed. The 7 of them sat down at the table in the middle of the small hall. Karachi was very diligent and took the initiative to pour a glass of water for everyone. Aurora sat down with a serious expression. She was the strongest, so she took the initiative to speak. Let me speak first. My name is Aurora. I'm a senior archer. I once hunted a level 6 exotic beast alone. As soon as Aurora's voice fell, everyone exclaimed. They knew how powerful a level 6 exotic beast was. It was indeed not easy for Aurora to hunt a level 6 exotic beast alone. Even though senior students might not be able to do it. It was Manny's turn. She said embarrassedly, Manny, intermediate flaming swordsman. I don't have any decent battle records. Lantry said in a low voice, Lantry, junior knight. Alas, unfortunately, I don't have a horse. If I had a war horse, I would be able to display the power of a knight. Karachi blushed and lowered her head, saying softly, Karachi, apprentice senior magician. I don't have any decent battle records. Lantry, intermediate priest. I participated in a few ranking battles, but I can't be of much use. Alas, I always drop the ball at the crucial moment. Lantry said in annoyance. It was Fatty's turn. He said with a smile, Kid, apprentice junior thief. I've always fought bravely and charged at the front. That battle record, I'm not bragging, but it would take 3 days and 3 nights to finish talking about it. All right, that's enough. Next. Before Kid could finish, he was interrupted by Aurora. He could only shut his mouth in embarrassment. 6 pairs of eyes looked at Ron in unison. Ron moved his mouth. Just as he was about to speak, Aurora interrupted him again. All right, Ron, you don't have to say anything. We all know. Aurora sighed. Necromancers have limited use in battle. Ron was about to open his mouth and say the words advanced necromancer when he heard Aurora's words. Aurora gritted her teeth and thought for a while. After a long time, she finally raised her head. With Lantry joining us, I think our strength will increase a little. As long as the priest doesn't drop the ball at the crucial moment, as Aurora thought about it, she spoke out the battle plan in her mind. Me. With Manny and Lonsim. If we work together well, I believe that we won't lose too badly. Of course, with just the 3 of us, it's impossible for us to win the championship in the ranking battle, but at least we won't be at the bottom. In the Academy's ranking battle, the winner would be richly rewarded, while the loser would be criticized by the entire Academy. In fact, it was an assessment of the degree of cooperation in battle. This assessment was based on the dormitories. Due to the lack of people in dormitory 302, coupled with the fact that Fatty and the others weren't doing their best, their results had always been at the bottom. The proud and arrogant Aurora was naturally unwilling to accept this, but she couldn't do anything by herself. Aurora gritted her teeth. Her gaze slowly swept across Ron, Karachi, Lantry, and kids' faces. When the time comes, the few of you will be the first to rush up and battle and disrupt the opponent's formation. I will take the opportunity to launch a sneak attack from behind. This way, we will have a chance to win. Lantry and Karachi nodded inwardly. If they weren't strong enough, there was nothing they could do about being cannon fodder. Only Fatty Kid was laughing heartlessly. No matter what Aurora said, he would be the first to rush out. As for Ron, he didn't express any opinion. Chapter 85. The opening ceremony for new students was held in the small auditorium. Although it was a small auditorium, it could easily accommodate a few thousand people. The opening ceremony for the older students was held in the large auditorium. It was said that the large auditorium could hold tens of thousands of people, but Ron was a new student and had no chance to see it. In room 302, apart from Ron, everyone else had gone to the large auditorium to attend the opening ceremony. Search for the latest updates here. Ron walked down the aisle of the auditorium, breathing in the faint scent of books. On both sides of the aisle stood lifelike statues that were taller than a person. Miso Elsdajafar, Noah 21,849 to 22,107. Ron read the small words below the statue as he walked into the small auditorium. A staff member with a badge on his chest led Ron to a corner and sat down. These staff members were ordinary citizens of Balarax. Before they were hired by the academy, they did some odd jobs here, mainly cooking and cleaning. Now, they were here to maintain order. Ron looked around and saw that the auditorium was already full of people. As the opening ceremony had not yet begun, many people were standing and shouting in the aisle. The auditorium was very lively. Seeing this scene, Hamelin sighed. It's so lively here. It's good to be young. Looking at them, I feel like I'm dozens of years younger. Hee, if you were here, Grandpa, I'm afraid you'd sit up there. Ron pointed at the rostrum. Hamelin pursed his lips. Rostrum? That's for the weak. I haven't seen a single person from the sacred domain. Master was a strength that Ron looked up to, but Hamelin called them weak. Ron could only shake his head and smile bitterly. Suddenly, his body was touched by someone, followed by a delicate cry. Ouch! The one who bumped into Ron was a very young girl, about 13 or 14 years old. She kept saying, I'm sorry, I didn't see. It's okay. Ron was also very open-minded, but why did he feel that the voice sounded so familiar? The girl raised her head, her bright eyes flashing with a clear light. Ron was shocked when he saw it. It's you? The girl in front of him was none other than God Eli, who Ron had fought against before. She was the youngest genius mage in the Salter family. God Eli also recognized Ron, and her eyes showed surprise. Ron took a step back, his eyes full of vigilance. He had killed the Salter family's young Master Jordan, who was God Eli's cousin. The hatred between them was irreconcilable. Ron was on guard, while Godeli's expression was rather calm. At this moment, the atmosphere was rather awkward. God Eli did not look like she wanted to make a move. She only gently ran her fingers through her hair, and a bright smile appeared on her face. Ron, I didn't expect to see you here. Ron was startled. He had no idea what she was up to, and the vigilance in his eyes grew even stronger. God Eli continued, I don't know anyone here, but now, there's finally someone I know. At this moment, the voice of the academy's staff came, indicating for the students to sit down. The opening ceremony was about to begin. God Eli smiled. The opening ceremony is about to begin. Let's talk later. After saying that, she ignored Ron and walked past him. After taking a few steps, she turned around and said, Ron, your necromancy is very strong. After saying that, she turned around and left. What's going on? Aren't we enemies? Why does it seem like she doesn't have much hostility towards me? Ron was at a loss. Looking at the ponytail swinging behind her petite figure, this little girl is really strange. Ron became even more vigilant. He did not know what she was plotting. As soon as Ron sat down, the opening ceremony began. First, several famous teachers of various professions gave speeches, asking everyone to study hard and listen carefully in class. The last one to go on stage was Vice Dean Darbus, whom Ron had met before. He explained the current situation of this world. There were many strong people in each race, and he hoped that everyone could maintain a humble attitude and not be arrogant and complacent. Ron noticed that God Eli was sitting in front of the special admission students. What was different from the ordinary freshmen was that there was a large table covered with a red cloth, and there were all kinds of desserts on it. Even the chairs they were sitting on were made of real leather, which was completely different from the hardwood seats of ordinary students. Reaching the level of a beginner at a very young age was considered a special admission student. God Eli, who had reached the level of an intermediate mage at the age of 13, was impressively among the special admission students. At this moment, Ron suddenly felt the difference between ordinary freshmen and special admission students. He even had an impulse to sit at the special admissions students' table. When the surrounding freshmen looked at the special admissions students' table, their eyes also revealed expressions of envy and jealousy. This was a small technique used by the academy to stimulate the students' motivation. Through the comparison of their identities, it had a great impact on the student psychology. Why could they sit there? Why could they enjoy this special privilege? Why? Although these freshmen did not show anything on their faces, there were great waves in their hearts. Hummelin also noticed this change in Ron. He smiled and said, "Ron, there are some things that you don't need to be envious of. What will come will naturally come. As for the path of the strong, what you gain is far greater than what you pay." Ron nodded heavily. "Grandpa Hummelin, I understand." At this time, Dab's speech on the stage also came to an end. "Students, the Balarax Academy is only a starting point on your path to becoming a powerhouse. The height of this starting point will not determine your future achievements. I hope that all of you will go even higher and further on your path to becoming a powerhouse." After Dabs finished speaking, the scene was filled with warm applause. After the opening ceremony, the students dispersed in twos and threes. Ron sat motionless, waiting for these students to leave before standing up and walking towards a door. In the aisle of the corridor, the figure of a young girl stood abruptly. She was wearing a white magic robe with red edges. Her long hair was tied into a ponytail. Her body was leaning against the wall, and it looked like she had been waiting for a long time. "God Eli." Ron's pupils shrank, his hand pressing on the space bag, his face showing a guarded expression. God Eli raised her head, a warm smile on her face, without a trace of hostility. "Ron, you came out with a pornographic novel. I've been waiting for you for a long time. What are you waiting for me for?" Ron's expression was solemn as he said in a deep voice, "If you want to avenge Jordan, there's no such thing." God Eli shook her head and changed the topic. "Ron, let's not talk about this anymore. Let's walk together." Ron was silent, but he could only nod in agreement. He also wanted to know what God Eli was up to. The two walked on the tree-lined path of the Balarax Academy, the spring breeze blowing in their faces, making them feel comfortable. God Eli brushed the hair in front of her forehead and said with a smile, "Ron, I think you must be feeling very strange. You and I are clearly enemies, but I took the initiative to look for you." Ron immediately stopped, his eyes fixed on God Eli. "You don't want to avenge Jordan?" God Eli laughed. "Why would I want to avenge Jordan?" Ron looked at her with a puzzled expression. God Eli smiled. "Ron, you might not understand, but in a large family like Salter, the so-called family affection is the cheapest thing. As one of the family's successors, Jordan died, so Patriarch Ja Lai was naturally furious. But in the family, you don't know how many people secretly rejoiced." Ron indeed didn't understand. He didn't grow up in a large family. To those large families, the struggle for the successor was no less than the struggle for the throne in the palace. It was the same scheme, the same cruelty. "I'm not the successor," God Eli continued. "Although I have a lot of support in the family, I understand that this is only their scheme. Although Patriarch Ja Lai appreciates me, it doesn't mean that he will support me to become the patriarch." Ron was silent. He didn't know why God Eli would tell him this. Jordan died, am I sad? I don't think so. To be honest, if I didn't owe his mother a favor, I wouldn't have gone to Naka Manor. Although according to seniority, I should call him cousin, I don't have much affection for him. It doesn't matter if he's dead or alive. It has nothing to do with me, so why would I want to avenge him? God Eli said with a smile. After she finished speaking, she quietly looked at Ron. Ron was silent for a long time. He took a deep breath and asked, "Why are you telling me this?" God Eli didn't answer directly. She only smiled. "Ron, I can feel that your strength has increased again. To be honest with your strength, you are most qualified to sit in the front row of the special enrollment seats." Godely continued, "I secretly went to Asinaris." Ron's heart suddenly trembled. Asinaris' 1,000-year impregnable fortress was destroyed in a single strike. "Ron, I really don't know how you did it. This kind of strength makes my heart cold." Godely's tone was full of envy. However, Ron knew in his heart that that strike was because he had used the divine power of death. It wasn't his own strength. So at that moment, I decided that I would no longer treat you as an enemy. I don't have the ability to interfere with the family. As far as I'm concerned, treating you as an enemy isn't a very good choice. God Eli raised her head, a pair of beautiful eyes carrying a maturity that didn't match her age. "Ron, as a member of the family, I'm really sorry that Jordan accidentally killed your grandfather. But that matter is already in the past. I personally hope to be friends with you, not enemies." With that, God Eli stretched out her hand. Ron sighed. He didn't want that matter to turn out like this. Looking at that delicate white, jade-like hand under the sunlight, he hesitated whether he should hold it or not. Gradually, a trace of disappointment flashed in God Eli's eyes. "God Eli, so you're here. I've been looking for you for a long time." At that moment, a voice interrupted the two. A tall, thin, and fair-skinned young man dressed in noble attire quickly walked over and stood beside God Eli. He looked at Ron with intense hostility. "Who is he?" Before Ron could speak, God Eli interrupted. "Senior Tosny, this is Ron. He's also from the Holy Roman Empire. He's an old friend. Ron, this is Tosny, my senior from the same dorm. So that's how it is." The young man called Tosny nodded. He sized up Ron a few times and looked at his commoner attire with a trace of disdain in his eyes. "God Eli, let's go back. The dorm has a short meeting to discuss the situation of the Academy ranking tournament." "Oh." God Eli nodded and waved at Ron. "Ron, goodbye." Looking at the two's departing figures, Ron was unsure and asked Homelin, "Grandpa Homelin, what do you think?" "That girl is a little scheming, but there are many people like that in large families. In my opinion, she shouldn't have any ill intentions towards you." Chapter 86. Ron, Kid, Lantry, and Rum were in the same room. Aurora, Karachi, and Manny were in another room. That night, Ron slept soundly for the first time. Here, there was no wind and frost, no soul-stirring pursuits, and no need to live in fear. The next day, Ron woke up on time and went to the cafeteria to eat breakfast. Then, he walked to the classroom. Today was his first class. Search for the latest updates here. When he arrived at the classroom, he saw that many students had already arrived. However, there were still many empty seats. Ron was surprised to see a familiar face, Gold Eli. She smiled and waved her hand, gesturing for Ron to sit beside her. Ron smiled and shook his head, declining. He wasn't that familiar with Gold Eli yet. Ron glanced at Gold Eli and saw a trace of disappointment on her face. Ron casually found a seat and sat down. Hummelin laughed and said, "Ron, there are many new geniuses here. Apart from Gold Eli, there are even warriors at the age of 15. Some are even at the advanced level, as expected of specially recruited students. Look at that blue-haired girl. She's only 16 years old. She's actually an advanced mage and a water elemental at that. That boy in white, advanced swordsman. TSK. These people's talent is not simple." Hommelin praised and pointed out the people he pointed out to Ron. Most of the people he pointed out were at the intermediate warrior level, and a few were at the advanced level. Ron's talent in necromancy was indeed very good, but his current strength was all thanks to the soul ring. It was very impressive that other youths of the same age could reach this level. As a student, strength wasn't enough. They also needed to learn all kinds of knowledge. Ron's first class was literature, and his second class was arithmetic. Under the school teacher's seductive and in-depth teaching, Ron listened with great interest. It seemed very simple, but contained great principles. Hamelin was also very supportive of this knowledge. In his words, as a strong person, in addition to improving their strength, they also needed to learn all kinds of knowledge. Otherwise, they would only become a fool who only knew how to act recklessly. The school's teachers were divided into two types. One was the professional mentor who guided the students on the path of cultivation. The other was the teacher who specialized in teaching all kinds of knowledge, such as arithmetic, art, literature, and so on. Teachers were usually commoners. Compared to the mentors, they didn't have much strength and were more scholarly. Compared to their knowledge, the students were far worse. The Balarax Academy was a boarding school, and all students had to live in the academy, even the locals. Once the strict nobles were let loose, many of them began to lose their self-awareness, especially these teachers who imparted knowledge. They themselves did not have much strength and could not control these students. During the first lesson of the semester, there were already students whispering and eating. Some even openly fell in love in class. This was all thanks to the fact that men and women were in the same dormitory. There were very few students who paid attention in class. In this world, everything is about strength. Teachers without strength, who would place them in their eyes? If it was a different mentor, the situation would be much better. In Ron's eyes, these teachers were very worthy of respect. They were very dedicated, patiently explaining every difficult detail until everyone understood it. They didn't care if anyone was listening or not. The arithmetic class ended very quickly, and there was a 10-minute break between classes. As the bell rang, the students returned to their seats one after another. The next class was history. Ron had just sat down when he saw a familiar figure walk up to the podium. He focused his eyes and saw that it was his mentor, Vivian. Vivian was the necromancy mentor. Since the necromancy major didn't have any students, she didn't live up to her title as a mentor. Thus, she had been holding the position of history teacher. Vivian walked up to the podium and swept her gaze over the classroom. When she saw Ron, she nodded slightly. "Hello, everyone. My name is Vivian. I'm your history teacher. It's nice to meet you all." Applause sounded, but it was a little sparse. Ron was very enthusiastic because this was his mentor. All right, let's turn to the first page of the book. Today's class is Ancient Legends. The Lost Continent. A long, long time ago, a group of strange humans lived on the Earth. They controlled skeletons and engaged in cruel battles with strange beasts. This period of time is known as the Ancient Era. Ron was surprised. The Ancient Era? Isn't that the era of the Scourge Church? Hamelin said in a deep voice. There seems to be a connection. If you listen carefully, you might find the mystery of the disappearance of necromancy magic. Vivian quickly got into character. She vividly described, these people were extremely powerful. They weren't inferior to the elves and beasts of the Ancient Era. Vivian's saliva flew everywhere as she spoke, but the students below didn't have much interest. They chatted, ate, and fell in love. Only Ron listened very seriously. At this time, a sneer suddenly came from the corner of the classroom, breaking the harmonious atmosphere. He said in a strange tone, "Teacher Vivian, do you think it's the necromancer who's called a loser on the continent?" The classroom suddenly roared with laughter. The faces of the students were full of gloating. They saw Vivian on the podium wearing a long robe decorated with skeletons. It was obvious that she was a necromancer. As the saying goes, hit someone, don't hit them in the face. The students, who wanted to see the world in chaos, quickly switched to watching mode. The one who spoke was a youth of 16 or 17. He had a head of blue curly hair, fair skin, and an exquisite face. He looked extremely spirited, and a flirtatious smile hung at the corner of his mouth. His name was High Firth, a noble of the Roland Empire. He was also a genius student of the Balarax Academy this year. He had an older brother who was studying in the advanced class, so he was very familiar with all the rules of the academy. Apart from not being able to provoke a teacher, verbal conflict was acceptable for those teachers who didn't have the strength. He had already asked around and found out that Vivian was a necromancy teacher. She had the least status among the teachers, so he felt at ease provoking her. Vivian's face was somewhat pale. She didn't expect to encounter such a situation on the first day of school. Highforth continued to provoke. "Teacher Vivian, tell me, are necromancers really as powerful as the legends say?" Vivian took a deep breath. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, but she didn't have much experience in dealing with it. There was no other reason than her lack of confidence. The so-called confidence was referring to strength. If you say necromancers are powerful, then let's have a contest. As a teacher, if you can't beat a pornographic novel, then let's have a contest. If you can't beat your own student, then you'll lose face. If you say they aren't powerful, then isn't that slapping your own mouth? She thought for a moment and said, according to the records passed down from ancient times, necromancy was indeed the mainstream of the continent in ancient times. It's just that true necromancy has been lost for a long time now, and what we necromancers have learned is only the tip of the iceberg. Vivian's refutation was reasonable, and even Homelin couldn't help but nod inwardly. The current necromancy really was the tip of the iceberg, or even worse. Heh. Highforth laughed sinisterly and stood up. There's no evidence of what happened 100,000 years ago. Of course, you can say whatever you want, Highforth laughed. Just yesterday, I found dozens of necromancers on the streets of the east side of the city to amuse them. I made them line up, one moment in an S shape, the next moment in a B shape, and finally made them bark like dogs. Guess how much it cost? How much? A few of Highfield's buddies cooperated with him and started putting on an act. Heh, it didn't even cost 3 gold coins in total. It's really too damn cheap. Ha ha ha. Those buddies laughed loudly, causing many students in the classroom to laugh as well. The atmosphere in the classroom was ruined. Vivian was so angry that her face turned pale. She gritted her teeth, and her eyes reddened for some reason. She felt wronged, and tears kept flowing in her eyes. Don't cry. Don't cry. I have to be strong. This little blow is nothing. Vivian tried her best to comfort herself, but her fluctuating emotions made her body involuntarily tremble. Highforth watched this beautiful female teacher lose face in front of all the students, and his heart was filled with unreasonable pleasure. He didn't intend to let her go, and laughed. Teacher Vivian, I have no intention of questioning your faith, but the great prophet taught us that seeing is believing. Teacher Vivian, please summon a few skeletons to broaden our horizons. Okay. Do your best. Highforth, I support you. The students' emotions were ignited, and the atmosphere suddenly rose to the peak. There were gloating laughter everywhere, and only a few quiet female students didn't join in the commotion. Vivian felt isolated like never before. Who told her to have no strength? In the Noah continent, strength was the most important thing. Here, everyone knew that necromancers were trash. She even talked about how powerful necromancers were in class. Many students didn't say anything on the surface, but they already disapproved of it in their hearts. Enough. At this time, a shout was heard, and it was extremely loud in this noisy classroom. Ron's face was tense. His patience had reached its limit. He admitted that necromancy magic was indeed lost, and it was reasonable for people to look down on it. But he couldn't stand it being insulted like this. Yo, someone stood up. Highforth turned his head indifferently and glanced at Ron. He laughed. I was wondering who it was. So you're also a necromancer. You're also trash. Teacher Vivian, this is your necromancy student, right? You got guts. Highforth pulled the table in front of him, making a loud noise. He grinned as he rolled up his sleeves, and a faint fiery glow circulated on his arm. He walked closer step by step and sneered. Reckless fellow, let this lord teach you how to write the word death. The reason why Highforth was so angry was because he always thought of himself as the boss of the new students. As a specially recruited student, he indeed had the capital to do so. Ron stood up to provoke him, and naturally he was unhappy. He didn't dare to hit a teacher due to the school rules, but no one dared to say anything about taking care of a student. Intermediate swordsman? Ron's mouth curved up. In just a moment, he had seen through the opponent's strength. A burst of black gas surged out of his hand, and a short-boned spear appeared in Ron's hand. He sneered, and without the slightest fear, he faced High Firth head-on. What? All the students in the classroom were stunned. What shocked them wasn't the fight in the classroom, but the fact that the necromancer who everyone thought was trash actually had the courage to face High Firth head-on. Was he looking for death? High Firth's face darkened, and a trace of killing intent flashed through his eyes. Since you're looking for death, I'll reluctantly let you bleed a little. Stop! At this time, a delicate shout came from behind High Firth. He turned his head in surprise and saw that Goldeli, who was also a specially recruited student, had stood up at some point. She held a fireball in her hand, and the fireball had already taken shape and was dancing in her hand. High Firth's expression suddenly froze. Goldeli, what are you doing? Chapter 87. Not only were High Firth and the students in the class astonished, even Ron was astonished. He didn't expect that Goldeli would bravely step forward at such a critical moment. Although Ron didn't need Goldeli's protection with his strength, Goldeli was also very clear about this point. This little girl is expressing her goodwill towards you, Hummelin said with a smile. Ron also nodded in agreement, feeling a little touched in his heart. His suspicions and wariness towards Goldeli had mostly dissipated. High Firth stared blankly for a moment, a trace of jealousy flashing in his eyes. Goldeli, why? Are you going to make things difficult for me, for this trash necromancer? High Firth, who was also from the Holy Roman Empire, had known Goldeli for a long time. His Cabalin family and Goldeli's Salter family had been friends for generations. High Firth had fallen in love with Goldeli at first sight a long time ago. His family also had the intention of forming a marriage alliance with her, but Goldeli had never spoken to him. The corners of Goldeli's mouth rose slightly, revealing a charming smile as she said, High Firth, I've already said that Ron is my friend. If you dare to touch him, you'll be making things difficult for me. Goldeli's expression darkened slightly, and the fireball in her hand expanded a little. I'm not joking with you. The classroom was dead silent, and the atmosphere suddenly dropped to the freezing point. Even Vivian on the podium had her mouth wide open. Goldeli was the youngest in the class, but from her facial features, she was already a living beauty. She came from the famous Salter family of the Holy Roman Empire. Most importantly, she was very powerful. She was already an intermediate mage at the mere age of 13 and was the idol of many of the new students. Not only the freshmen, but even the seniors also regarded her as their wife. In just a few days after school started, she had already received dozens of love letters. Although Goldeli was only 13 years old, she was extremely mature. She rejected all the love letters, causing the students to be extremely disappointed. Such an outstanding genius would actually stand up for a useless necromancer, and even shed all pretense of cordiality with another specially recruited student. Her relationship with him was worth pondering over. This caused many of the male students in the class to feel jealous. These piercing gazes were naturally directed at Ron. The muscles on High Firth's face twitched fiercely a few times. He really didn't expect Goldeli to stand out at this time. This made it difficult for him to back down. Goldeli had cast an intermediate spell, Fireball. She was clearly putting her life on the line. High Firth had no doubt that he would be in serious trouble if the spell came crashing down. He couldn't do anything about Goldeli, and could only cast a vicious gaze at Ron. Stinking brat. Don't hide behind a woman if you have the guts. What's the point of relying on a woman to protect you? Ron smiled. I don't need anyone to protect me, and I've never been afraid of anyone. If you want to fight, I'll accompany you. Ah! Exclamations rang out in the classroom. Among them was Mentor Vivian, who was on the podium. Her mouth was opened so wide that she could swallow an egg. Was this guy crazy? A necromancer actually dared to challenge an intermediate swordsman? Or did this guy have no concept of strength in his mind? What kind of people could enter the Ballarak's academy? They were all geniuses with outstanding talent since childhood. As a specially recruited student, High Firth was a genius among geniuses. Could it be that he was treating High Firth as an ordinary child? In the classroom, only Godalee didn't have a surprised expression. She already knew Ron's strength. Even when they first met, Ron's strength had already surpassed High Firth's, let alone now. The reason why she chose to stand out at this time was to express her position and show goodwill to Ron. At this moment, the classroom bell rang, and Vivian let out a long sigh. She finally found a way out. Today's class ends here. Class dismissed. High Firth also knew that today's fight was not going to happen. His eyes revealed a vicious expression. Stinking brat, I won't let today's matter end like this. Just wait and see if you have the ability. He glanced at Godalee and moved his mouth, but didn't say anything. He turned and walked out. Ron smiled and withdrew his bone spear, replying, "Anytime." Godalee also withdrew her magic and ran to Ron's side under the envious gazes of everyone. "Are you all right?" Ron glanced at her and smiled. "Thank you. You're welcome. I know he's no match for you," Godalee said with a smile. If Godalee hadn't stood out, Ron would have had the chance to teach High Firth a lesson. With his current strength, even if he didn't summon the skeletal warriors, he could still beat High Firth to the ground in 3 minutes. To be honest, he felt a little regretful that he couldn't teach this arrogant fellow a lesson. "You don't have to say anything. I still have to thank you." Ron's suspicion of Godalee had mostly disappeared. "It's good to have a friend like you." Godalee's face bloomed with a smile. "So you admit that I'm your friend?" Ron nodded. "I killed Jordan to avenge my grandfather. Now that Jordan is dead, my revenge on the Salter family ends here. If you don't help my family harm me, I'll treat you as a friend." Godalee was delighted and stuck out her tongue. "How would I dare? I can't beat you. Ron, come with me for a moment." At this moment, Vivian tidied up the things on the podium and said to him, "Your mentor is calling for you." Godalee and Ron were chatting happily. The boy and girl who had let go of their grudges and started to have a good impression of each other. When she heard Vivian call for him, disappointment appeared in Godalee's eyes. "All right, let's talk when we're free." Ron said goodbye to Godalee and left the classroom. "Mentor Vivian, where are you taking me?" Vivian didn't say a word along the way and kept walking in front. Ron followed behind and couldn't help but ask. Vivian didn't answer. It was obvious that she was in a bad mood. Ron also tactfully kept his mouth shut. "We're here," Vivian said softly when they arrived in front of a dilapidated house. Ron sized up the dilapidated building. It had long been covered in dust. He didn't know how long it had been since it had been cleaned. The windows, door frames, and everything was tattered. A gust of wind blew past, and half of the window fell off and made a creaking sound. Vivian's heart was heavy as she took out a key and opened the dilapidated door. Ron noticed that the dilapidated door was decorated with skulls. "This is our necromancy major's classroom," Vivian said as she walked in. Ron immediately followed. Pornographic novels, there were only a few desks in the classroom. The desks were covered in dust, and the windows, made of broken tinted glass, were densely covered in spiderwebs. At this moment, Ron's gaze fell on a stone statue not far away. Vivian walked closer to the statue and reached out to gently wipe the base of the statue. Soon, a small line of words appeared at the base of the statue. "Tristalum Khan." Ron looked at it and was puzzled. Who is he? Why is this statue placed here? Vivian stared at the statue, and her eyes lit up. He is the progenitor of our necromancy major, Lord Tristalum Khan. Progenitor? A huge question mark rose in Ron's heart. He looked at Homelin at the side. Homelin shook his head, indicating that he didn't know this person. Vivian's tone became heavy. About 5,000 years ago, our progenitor was very interested in the legendary necromancy magic when he was very young. When he was almost 70 years old, he finally found a book that described necromancy magic in an ancient ruin. It was a pity that this book was incomplete, as if it had been burned. There were densely packed ancient characters written on it. Lord Khan was wild with joy. After nearly 10 years of dedicated research, he finally deciphered the necromancy magic in the book and imparted this legendary magic to the world, restoring the original history. The necromancy magic of the ancient times could no longer be investigated, but Lord Khan restored the research of necromancy magic to its original state. It was he who revived the necromancy magic that had disappeared for many years and gave it a new lease of life. It is because of this that we necromancers respectfully call him the progenitor of necromancy magic. Hamelin sighed silently. No wonder necromancy magic had become like this. It was restored based on that incomplete book. If the key pages were missing, the entire necromancy magic would have changed. This was the real reason why necromancy magic was called trash magic. The so-called progenitor of necromancy magic was just a person who restored necromancy magic. Although it had changed, no matter what, it was this person called Khan who brought necromancy magic that had disappeared for many years to this world. It was not an exaggeration to call him the progenitor of necromancy magic. Thinking of this, Hamelin couldn't help but feel deep respect for him. Vivian turned her head and smiled at Ron. Ron, you learned the basics of necromancy magic from the necromancers on the streets, right? This. Ron was at a loss for words. Vivian waved her hand. It's not your fault. Actually, I think you've seen it for yourself. The so-called necromancy magic isn't as powerful as the legends say. Those novels are all fictional. In those third-rate novels on the streets, necromancers are described as the embodiment of death, evil, and terror. But in reality, as necromancers, we naturally know what's going on. True necromancy magic doesn't have any power at all. No, those aren't true necromancy magic. Ron shouted in his heart. However, he couldn't say the truth because Hamelin had said that he didn't have the power now. Vivian smiled sadly. There are many versions of the legend of necromancy magic. In the legends, the ancient necromancers were almighty. The current necromancy magic isn't ancient necromancy magic at all. I'm afraid that the true ancient necromancy magic has been lost. Mitter Vivian, do you believe these words? Ron stared into Vivian's eyes. I don't know. Vivian shook her head. There was a period of time when I was very willing to believe it, but now I don't know if I should believe it or not. Ron lowered his head and sighed softly. Vivian said, My father has been researching necromancy magic for a long time. He found some things in some ancient documents. It's these things that have been supporting my belief in the existence of ancient necromancy magic. Ron blinked and revealed a curious expression. What is it? Vivian hesitated. My father found out that necromancy magic was prevalent in ancient times. It happened to be around the same time as the god of the orcs, Hellscream, Nuga, and the god of the elves, goddess of the moon, Alice. Chapter 88. Vivian's beautiful eyes swept over him. What's wrong? Ron, you seem very surprised. No, it's nothing. Ron stammered. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. He laughed dryly to cover up his embarrassment, and at the same time quietly asked Hamelin's grandfather, Grandpa, do you know them? Hamelin sighed. Not only do I know them, but they were also good friends. One of them was a totem saint of the orcs, and the other was a priestess of the moon of the elves. After I died, I don't know what happened to them. Ron asked, who are they? Hamelin said, they're a vassal race of the Scourge Church. Ron said, a vassal race. Hamelin thought for a while. At that time, the Scourge Church was at its peak. Before that, it had conquered countless races, and these races all became our vassals, submitting to the Scourge Church. But now it seems that many races have disappeared, and only humans, elves, orcs, and magical beasts are left. Were there many races in the past? There were many. For example, there were the giants who were tall and trained in thunder magic. They were strong in close combat, and their thunder magic was terrifying. There were also the dwarves who had infinite strength and were proficient in the art of forging. There were also the goblins who were good at all kinds of precision machinery. There were also the halfling chefs who had no fighting ability but were naturally good at cooking. There were too many races. Now it seems that only these few races are left, Ron thought for a while and asked, Grandpa, was the Scourge Church formed by humans at that time? Yes, humans. Homelin answered with certainty. What about the magical beasts? Where were they at that time? Homelin said, strictly speaking, magical beasts were not a single race. They were formed by many magical beast races. At that time, they were scattered all over the continent and did not form a unified force. I see. Ron nodded. He suddenly understood a lot of things. Well, Merlin sighed. I think we're getting closer and closer to the truth. With the clues we've found and my confirmation, it shouldn't be hard to uncover the truth. But for some reason, I feel a trace of fear. Just how much power would it take to topple the mighty Calamity Church? That's right. At this moment, Vivian stood up and smiled at Ron. The story of necromancy ends here. All right, shall we start learning now? Study? Ron asked in surprise. Here? Vivian smiled. Of course it's here. Do we have any other classrooms? Clean this place up and you can use it. Oh yes. Vivian rolled up her sleeves. Come, let's use our hands to restore this place to its original state. They took a rag, a broom, a bucket, and other things from the corner. Without saying a word, the two immediately got to work. They swept the floor clean, wiped the dust off the table, fixed the windows, and threw away the ones that couldn't be fixed. After working for more than 2 hours, they finally finished all the work. Looking at the new classroom, they were indescribably happy. Vivian and Ron looked at each other and laughed happily. Vivian suddenly felt playful. She reached out her dirty hand and wiped Ron's face. Hey, Ron, your face is dirty. Are you sure? Ron wiped his face with his hand. Who knew that when he wiped it? His little face became even dirtier. This made Vivian laugh heartily. Ron also laughed embarrassedly. The two of them were about the same age. Vivian was only 23 years old and still had a childlike innocence. After some tossing and turning, the two of them finally sat down. Ron sat on the chair and Vivian stood on the podium. All right, let's start the class. The first lesson is the summary of necromancy magic. Ron, the book in your hand was written by the ancestor of necromancy magic, Lord Khan. Of course, it's a handwritten copy. It records some of the basic elements of necromancy magic. Of course, this necromancy magic is more profound than the necromancers on the streets. Vivian vividly described the lesson. Her voice was very pleasant, as if she was telling a story. She deliberately slowed down when she explained the theory of magic so that Ron could hear it more clearly and accept it faster. Ron listened as he flipped to the first page of the book. He had no choice but to look through it. He quickly saw a few errors, and most importantly, these errors were the most fatal. They were the complete opposite of the necromancy magic theory he was learning. The biggest mistake was that there was no method to cultivate soul power. Homelin shook his head as he listened. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Her theory is completely wrong. No wonder she summoned a useless skeleton. Besides, summoning skeletons is only one of the ways necromancers fight. Don't tell me necromancers only rely on summoning skeletons to fight. There are even more profound necromancy magics. Ron was stunned. More profound necromancy magics? What's that? Homelin stroked his beard. Of course there are. For example, you learned how to refine zombies and curses. This is a very powerful mental attack. Of course, with your current strength, you can't learn it yet. Oh, Ron nodded. He lowered his head and seriously read the book. After a while, he said, Grandpa Homelin, is it because they don't cultivate soul power that they can summon useless skeletons? Homelin nodded. That's right. Soul power is the foundation of necromancy magic. It's also the source of power. A skeleton without soul power is just a skeleton. Even if he summons a bone dragon, it's useless. It's just a skeleton that can move. Homelin said that Khan's necromancy theory was wrong from the start. I think he must have read some literature and learned that necromancers control skeletons. However, he only saw the surface and thought that necromancy magic was the magic to summon skeletons. This is a big mistake. Necromancy magic cultivates the soul. With the soul as the core, These skeletons will become real warriors and not just a pile of useless bones. If I'm not wrong, this guy called Khan should be a magician. He studied necromancy magic with magic as the foundation. In fact, these are two completely different things. He first summoned skeletons and then used his mental strength to control them. This research direction was wrong from the start. Necromancy magic doesn't require mental strength, but soul power. Ron thought for a while and said, "Grandpa, should I remind her that she's wrong?" Hamelin shook his head. "Now is not the time. Just listen carefully. Treat it as a story, but don't take it to heart." After an hour, Vivian finally finished the first lesson. She put down the book and looked up at Ron. "How was it? Did you understand the first lesson? If there's anything you don't understand, just ask." Ron replied, "Mentor Vivian, I think I already understand." "Understand? So fast?" Vivian's eyes widened in disbelief. He actually understood those cryptic terms and those extremely complicated and profound magic theories so quickly? That's impossible, right? She thought back to when she first started to understand it. It took her a long time to understand. Vivian coughed. "Since you understand, summon a skeleton for me to see." "Yes, Mentor Vivian." Ron replied. He did understand. Those cryptic terms were nothing out of the ordinary for a genuine necromancer like him. As for those complicated pornographic novels, they were nothing out of the ordinary. He didn't listen to the magic theories at all because Grandpa Hamelin said that they were wrong. Summoning skeletons was now a piece of cake for Ron. He didn't take out his bone staff. Instead, he raised his hand and muttered a long string of magic incantations. Vivian listened carefully. Suddenly, she frowned and interrupted Ron's spellcasting. "Wrong. The correct incantation should be %#yin***. Ron was stunned. He had unknowingly chanted the incantation to summon a skeleton warrior. No wonder Vivian felt that something was wrong. "Now repeat after me." At this time, Vivian was just like a strict teacher. Ron had no choice but to follow Vivian's incantation, even though it was obviously wrong. Not long after, a pile of bones appeared in front of Ron. These bones quickly assembled to form the shape of a human. This skeleton was dull and lifeless, without a trace of spiritual energy. It was similar to a walking corpse. More accurately, it was worse than a walking corpse. As for the fact that it could move on its own, that's great. He didn't expect Vivian to be so excited. Genius. Ron, you're simply a genius. In just a short 2 hours, you actually learned this necromancy magic? Ron was sweating profusely. The difficulty of this wrong version of necromancy magic was not even worth mentioning when compared to real necromancy magic. As a real necromancer, summoning it was as simple as eating and drinking. Real necromancy magic was extremely profound and complicated. Fortunately, Ron had a brilliant mentor like Hamelin. Under his guidance, Ron was able to make such great progress. "Ron, now control the skeleton to walk around and take a look," Vivian said excitedly. "Control? How can I control it without spiritual energy? My thoughts can't connect with this skeleton." Ron tried to control the skeleton, but it didn't move at all. Vivian said seriously, "Ron, use your spiritual energy. Concentrate." Ron took a deep breath. Imitating a mage, he used a small amount of spiritual energy. Sure enough, the skeleton raised its hand. So difficult. Just doing this action made Ron sweat profusely. Using spiritual energy to move the skeleton was really too difficult. No wonder this skeleton was like a puppet. It would be strange if it could fight. Just as others said, an adult holding a wooden stick could smash this skeleton into pieces. All right, let's stop here for today. Vivian looked at her student's tired appearance and couldn't help but feel some heartache. Ron relaxed his mind, and the skeleton disappeared into the air. His whole body also seemed to fall apart, limp and not wanting to move. This wrong method of summoning was really too difficult. Looking at Ron's incomparably depressed expression, Hamelin was already laughing until his stomach hurt. Vivian took out a handkerchief and gently wiped the sweat on Ron's forehead. She said softly, "Your spiritual energy consumption is too great. Go back and have a good rest. Come back tomorrow, okay?" Ron nodded. Chapter 89. Ron bid farewell to Vivian. Seeing that it was already quite late, he hurried back. When he rushed back to his classroom, he found that the classroom was crowded with people. Ron asked curiously, "What's going on?" It was fine if he didn't speak, but when Ron opened his mouth, dozens of pairs of eyes looked at him as if they had caught a criminal. "It's him, he's Ron. He's finally back. I thought he was a coward." Ron was stunned. What was going on? It was as if these people were looking for him. At this time, an older senior wearing a white magic robe quickly walked in front of Ron. His expression was serious. "Ron, right? We've been looking for you for a long time." Seeing the senior, Ron didn't dare to neglect. "You are?" The senior wearing a white magic robe slightly raised the corner of his mouth. "It's High Firth looking for you. He wants you to go to the duel arena." "High Firth? The duel arena?" Ron's brows slightly wrinkled. "Yes." The senior tilted his head, his face showing an expression that was not a smile. Right now, right away. At this point, Ron also understood what was going on. He had offended High Firth, so he sent people to take revenge on him. Ron's face suddenly turned cold. "What if I don't go?" "Don't go." The senior raised his eyelids slightly and curled his lips. Several seniors quickly surrounded him. "You?" Ron's heart went cold. Before he could understand, more than a dozen people surrounded him and stared at him with malicious eyes. It was as if he moved, he would be beaten up like a pig's head. The seniors surrounding him were all seniors. They all had the strength of intermediate warrior level or above. The one standing in front of him who gave the order had the strength of a senior mage. Ron's heart sank slightly. He understood that if he refused, he would immediately be besieged by a large number of advanced professionals. With his current strength, he was afraid that he would not be able to gain any advantage unless he was possessed by Grandpa Homelin. Forget it. It's good to follow them. Anyway, the matter with Firth High will be solved sooner or later. Ron thought for a moment and replied, "Okay, I'll go with you." The senior smiled and didn't say anything. Instead, he gracefully made an inviting gesture, as if he wasn't here to pick a fight, but to invite someone to have a meal. The other seniors sandwiched Ron in the middle, afraid that he would run away. Ron followed the white-robed senior all the way through the corridor and up the stairs, all the way to the dueling ground. The group of freshmen saw that there was something interesting to watch and immediately followed. "There's going to be a good show," a trainee said. It was obvious that he was quite excited. "Quick, don't block the way." Another freshman pushed and walked forward. When the freshmen in the same class heard this, they shook their heads. Alas, of all people to offend, he just had to offend Firth High. "Is that guy easy to provoke? I heard that the one called Ron is a necromancer." A freshman in the same class said. "He's dead for sure," the freshman said with a gloating expression on his face. "Let's go take a look too." Several freshmen nodded after hearing this and followed out. This kind of news spread from 1 to 10, 10 to 100, and soon it spread among the freshmen. Those freshmen immediately put down what they were doing and quickly chased after them. There were more and more freshmen, and soon they formed a torrent, rolling straight to the dueling ground where Firth High was. The surging stream of people passed through the campus. Except for those excited freshmen, the seniors showed disdain on their faces. What else could freshmen be so excited about? Fighting, as if they had never fought before. "Huh, what's going on over there?" In the cafeteria of the school, the beautiful Princess Kadena, who had long azure hair and was wearing a blue magic robe, pointed to the distance and asked, "What else could it be?" "Fighting. Those freshmen are really bored. If they have the ability, why don't they fight with the Soaring Dragon Academy? What kind of ability is it to fight in your own school?" The one who spoke was another beauty. She was one of the important figures in the dormitory of the Academy ranking tournament's first place, the silver-winged Pegasus Knight Shea. She was currently together with her good friend Kadena. In the dormitory of the Academy ranking tournament's first place, the Captain Mocklin had something to do today, and the others had also forgotten about their own matters. The two beauties were bored and only went to the cafeteria to eat some food while chatting with each other. When Kadena heard this, she immediately became interested. "Sister Shea, you seem to be very clear about it. Tell me what's going on. What else could it be?" Shea played with the already empty cup in her hand. Half of her body was lying on the table, and one hand was supporting her head. She weakly said, "Isn't it that freshman, that guy called Firth High? I don't know why he's causing trouble again. Didn't he have a conflict with a senior last time? Now he's actually fighting with a freshman." Kadena was astonished. Firth High? Could it be that Heful's younger brother? If it's not him, then who? Shea disdainfully smiled. If it wasn't for his brother Heful's, do you think he would dare to be so arrogant in school? I would have already told people to take care of him. All right, Kadena said. That guy beat up the senior on the first day of school. He beat him until his face was covered in blood. In the end, nothing happened, and Heful's had to clean up his mess. Shea curled her lips and straightened her body. Speaking of which, that senior is too disappointing. He couldn't even beat a junior. Too embarrassing. Kadena rolled her eyes and said with a smile, "Sister Shea, why don't we go and take a look?" Not going. Shea lazily lied on the table, as if her whole body was not feeling well. What's there to see about those juniors fighting? If you want to go, you go. I'm not going, Sister Shea. Go. Not going. Go. Kadena unknowingly sat beside Shea. She tightly hugged her and acted like a spoiled child. At the same time, she used her plump chest to rub Shea's body. Shea laughed and scolded. "You little slut, if you want to go, then go. Why are you pestering me?" At this moment, Shea's expression suddenly froze. She saw a familiar figure and could not help but open her mouth wide. "Sister Shea, what's wrong?" Kadena hurriedly asked. "It's him." Shea could not help but rub her eyes. Now that she could see clearly, it was him, the child who had defeated her at the mere age of 15. "Sister Shea, who are you talking about?" Kadena was astonished. Shea fiercely slammed her fist on the table, causing the things on the table to jump up. Despicable guy, Kadena was shocked. She had never seen the amiable Sister Shea so angry. She looked out the window and saw a thin and weak figure. "Who is that guy?" "I don't know him." Kadena confirmed that she did not know this person. However, her mind turned. To be able to make Sister Shea so angry, could it be? Thinking of this, Kadena suddenly woke up. A few days ago, she had heard that the necromancy major, which had not recruited any students for several years, suddenly had a new student. Could it be him? Sister Shea, is it that necromancer? The exceptionally intelligent Kadena immediately thought of the crux of the matter. Shea's body suddenly trembled. She had only told Kadena that she had lost to a 15-year-old necromancer. Who would have thought that she would be able to deduce it from such a small clue? She was indeed worthy of being a princess of the imperial family. At that time, it was Kadena who had discovered it when she saw the crack in Shea's armor. After repeated questioning, Shea finally told her. "Yes, it's him. Who would have thought that he would actually come to the Balarax Academy?" Shea clenched her fists and said through gritted teeth, "I want revenge. I want to defeat him and wash away my shame." After saying this, Shea suddenly stood up and pulled Kadena towards the duel arena. She was as hurried as a gust of wind, completely different from her previous languid demeanor. Hey, Sister Shea, we still haven't paid," Kadena called out, but the impatient Shea had dragged her away. Huff, huff, huff. Godeli quickly ran through the academy's corridors. She had just learned that Ron had been taken away by Firth High's people. As soon as she heard this, she became anxious. She immediately put down what she was doing and asked where they were before chasing after them. Ouch! Godeli wasn't paying attention and bumped into a person's body. She only felt that the other person's body was soft and had a fragrant smell. It seemed to be a girl. The young and weak Godeli was thrown far away. She rubbed her aching head and saw a tall and beautiful figure. Behind that figure stood a great beauty wearing a blue magic robe. These two people were Shea and Kadena. They were also walking towards the duel arena. Godeli bumped into Shea. What kind of physique did Shea have? She was nearly 8 meters tall and was a knight. Naturally, Godeli was at a disadvantage. She bumped into Shea's plump chest. If it was someone else, Shea would have already flipped out. But when she saw a 13-year-old little sister Her anger subsided. Kadena hurriedly asked with concern, "Little sister, are you okay?" Godeli raised her head and looked at Shea and Kadena. She immediately got up and said, "Two seniors, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." Shea coldly snorted. "Next time, be careful when you walk, oh yes." Godeli replied. She didn't have time to say hello and hurriedly ran towards the duel arena. What a strange person. Shea looked at Godeli's back and said, "No way. I think this little sister is very cute." Kadena covered her mouth and laughed. "Let's go." Shea pushed Kadena. The so-called duel arena was on top of an abandoned building in the academy. It was going to be demolished. Before it was demolished, it was the headquarters of the Firth of the Sea. The duel arena, as the name suggested, was a place where students dueled each other. Many students settled their grievances here. This place was relatively hidden, so they didn't have to be afraid of being discovered by the academy's teachers. Now, the duel arena was already crowded with people. Those who came here to watch the fun were all freshmen. There are also some seniors, but very few of them. For those seniors, this kind of thing was already commonplace in the Balarax Academy. It could only be regarded as a cheap trick. Chapter 90. Get out of the way. Quickly let me in. When Shea and Kadena arrived at the entrance of the abandoned building, a voice attracted their attention. "Sister Shea, look, isn't that the little girl from before?" Kadena pointed in that direction and said. Shea took a closer look. Sure enough, the little girl who had bumped into her was being stopped by a senior student, and she was in the middle of an argument. "I'm sorry, Miss Godeli, but I can't let you in," the white-robed magician said unhurriedly. He wasn't tall, but he was like an iron wall in front of Godeli. Godeli's face darkened. "Why? Can they all go in?" The white-robed magician smiled. "No reason. This is High Firth's special order. If you want to go in, you can, but only if you could defeat us." The white-robed magician's group of 4 had the strength of a senior professional. Godeli was only an intermediate magician, so defeating them would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Godeli bit her lips. She naturally knew that these people were specially arranged by High Firth to stop her, so that she wouldn't be able to ruin High Firth's business. Looking at the white-robed magician, who was smiling very kindly, Godeli began to ponder. High Firth's strength is around the middle 3rd stage of the warrior rank, and I'm at the middle 5th stage of the warrior rank. Ron's strength should be a bit stronger than mine, so dealing with High Firth shouldn't be a problem. However, I'm afraid that if they gang up on him, Ron will be at a disadvantage. At this moment, she sighed in her heart. Forget it, forget it. With these few senior fellows here, I'm afraid I won't be able to help much. Godeli could only leave in dejection. Shea and Kadena looked at each other and walked forward. "Frazino, what are you doing here?" Shea asked coldly. When the white-robed magician saw this, he thought, oh my God, why did he drag these 2 ladies into this? He couldn't afford to offend either of them. As one of the strongest teams in the academy, Shea and Kadena had a very high reputation in the academy. Frazino could only smile obsequiously. "2 great beauties. How come you have time to come here today?" Shea snorted. "Let me ask you, what are they doing up there?" Huh. Frazino chuckled. "It's nothing. It's just a few freshmen fooling around." "It's not a big deal," Kadena smiled. "Who's fooling around with who? Why do I seem to have heard that this has something to do with Hefels?" Kadena's smile charmed Frazino so much that he stuttered. Yes. One of the duelists, High Firth, is Hefels' younger brother." "Who's the other one?" Shea asked. Frazino smiled. "I think it's the new necromancer this year. His name is Ron. He's just a small character. Not worth mentioning. Sure enough, it's him." Shea and Katina glanced at each other. Shea's eyes contained a trace of hatred. That day, the scene of him suffering a crushing defeat at the hands of a 15-year-old child was still vivid in his mind. Recalling the figure of the girl who had just left, Kadena understood immediately. Disdain appeared on her face. "So you're standing here to stop his friend from going in?" "There. It's that girl just now. She seems to be quite strong." No. Frazino laughed dryly. Seeing Kadena's unfriendly expression, He jumped in fright and hurriedly said, "It's like this. Highforth knows that girl too. He was afraid that she would go up there and cause trouble. So he asked me to stop her. Oomph. So it's true." Kadena sniffled her cute little nose gently. Shea said coldly, "So, if we want to go up, you'll stop us too? Do I have to defeat you before I can go in?" Frazino jumped in fright. Fight with this lady? What a joke. Who didn't know that Shea was one of the geniuses of the Balrogs Academy? Although Frazino was also a senior professional, he was far from being comparable to Shea. No, I wouldn't dare. In front of Shea and Kadena, Frazino immediately cowered. He extended his hand and gestured for them to enter. "Miss Shea, Miss Kadena, how would I dare to stop you? Please come in." Ron was escorted by his seniors to the duel arena. The arena was already crowded with students who were watching the show. Some people had sympathy in their eyes, while others were gloating. Highforth was already waiting in the duel arena. When he saw Ron, he revealed a cruel smile. He had thought of thousands of ways to torture this necromancer who dared to talk back to him. He wanted to vent the anger in his heart and establish his authority in front of the freshmen. As for God Eli, he was not worried at all. Naturally, someone would take care of this matter. Ron walked to the duel arena. The arena was filled with people who were watching the show. The smell of sweat in the air was a little unpleasant. In the middle of the duel arena, there was a large empty space. Ron knew that this was the place where he and Highforth would settle their problems. At this time, he saw Highforth. The latter smiled and waved at him. At this time, he felt his body being pushed directly to the center of the arena. At this time, there was a burst of cheers from the crowd, and the atmosphere became even more lively. Ron turned around and glared fiercely at the senior who pushed him. That pair of eyes full of murderous intent made the senior's heart tremble, and he broke out in cold sweat. Damn it, why is this guy's gaze so scary? The senior gritted his teeth and forced himself to calm down. He raised his hand, but there was a flash of astonishment in his eyes. Why? Why is my hand trembling? Am I afraid? Why should I be afraid? He's just a good-for-nothing necromancer. On the barrier of the duel arena, a few men and women were sitting on it, talking and laughing wittily. They did not seem to care about the people around them. "This is the Ron you were talking about? He doesn't look like much." One of the red-haired girls said indifferently, "He's just a good-for-nothing snack." "Dear, I think you're making a big fuss over a small issue." The red-haired girl was also this year's special enrollment. She came from a family in the Holy Empire. Even a fool could see that she liked Highforth. The other people sitting in the same dormitory as Highforth, there were seniors and freshmen. These people respectfully called Highforth their boss. "Ishalot, you don't understand." Highforth smiled evilly. "I want to beat this good-for-nothing in front of everyone, so that he can't raise his head in front of the whole school. In the end, he can only leave the school with his tail between his legs." Ishalot laughed, her red hair fluttering in the wind. "Highforth, it's not wrong to say that you're making a big fuss over a small issue. Is it necessary to treat a good-for-nothing like this? If you don't like him, it's better to just kill him." Highforth smiled. "The school forbids killing people. Besides, letting him die so easily is not fun at all." With that, Highforth no longer paid attention to Ishalot. He jumped down from the barrier and looked straight at Ron. "Ron, you're finally here. You can't hide anymore, right? I've almost mobilized the whole school to find you. I've been waiting for a long time." Ron helplessly shook his head. "Highforth's pornographic novel." "Firth, you're called Highforth, right? If you want to fight, I'll accompany you at any time. But I don't think you need to call so many people to watch, right? Are you afraid?" Highforth licked his lips with a smile. "I want to beat you down in front of so many people and make you lose face. Let's see if you still dare to stand up against me. You want to be a hero, right? You want to save your mentor, right? Let me tell you that there's a price to pay for being a hero." Ron shook his head. "I originally wanted to teach you a lesson in secret, but I didn't expect you to call so many people to watch. Haven't you thought that if you lose, you'll be the one who loses face?" "Ha ha ha." The surrounding freshmen suddenly roared with laughter. They were laughing at Ron's shameless boasting. A necromancer with combat power only existed in legends and had never appeared in reality. On the other hand, Highfield's face was flushed red. He took the surrounding laughter as mockery. A necromancer dared to oppose him, making him lose face. He was so angry that he laughed. Good, good. Ron, I hope your strength is as good as your words. A guy who only knows how to talk is useless. Highfirth's heart was ruthless. He clenched his fists, and a faint dough chi overflowed from his body. His body gradually turned red. I originally only wanted to humiliate him, but since you're looking for death, then don't blame me. Highfirth swore in his heart that he would beat this reckless guy half to death. It's starting. The surrounding students clamored, pushing the atmosphere to a climax. Even the air became hot, and this group of people who wish for the world to be in chaos began to shout madly. Highfirth, beat him. Do your best. Highfirth, I'm optimistic about you. Haha, beat him down. At this time, all kinds of chaotic voices gradually converged, like a chant, turning into the same voice. Beat him. Beat him. Beat him. No one was optimistic about Ron. Not a single one. Everyone was cheering for Highfirth, and even those who had originally sympathized with Ron were now supporting Firth. In this world where strength was everything, the weak never needed cheap sympathy. Hommelin smiled faintly. His thoughts returned to the times when he was young and passionate. He wasn't worried about Ron at all. Ron, you should be able to deal with this guy, right? Ron nodded slightly, a trace of a smile in his eyes. Grandpa Hommelin, if I can't even deal with this guy, then my necromancy magic would have been in vain, and I wouldn't be worthy of being your disciple. Chapter 91. The atmosphere on the rooftop had already reached its climax. Shouts and cheers were incessant as all the freshmen excitedly watched Highfirth trample on that pitiful necromancer. It's him. Kadena followed Shea up to the rooftop. Her eyes widened in surprise as she wanted to see the person who had defeated Sister Shea. She couldn't help but be disappointed when she saw who it was. Search for the latest updates here. An ordinary-looking child with a head of unlikable black hair stood in the crowd. His thin and weak figure was standing in the crowd. Amidst the one-sided cheers, his eyes revealed a hint of determination. That's right, it's him. When enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Shea's eyes looked like they were about to spit fire. In her heart, Ron had already been killed 101 times. It can't be. He's so powerful. Sister Shea, who do you think will win? Kadena said with a smile. Shea said, if he summons that skeleton knight from that day, then he'll definitely win. No one here is a match for that skeleton knight. Kadena shrugged her shoulders. Sister Shea, have you read too many third-rate novels? How can you believe in the legend of necromancers? Shea didn't want to waste time with her. If you don't believe me, then keep watching and you'll know. The atmosphere on the stage had already reached its peak, and the air seemed to have frozen. Ron, I'll let you know the consequences of offending me. At this time, Highfirth shouted loudly. He moved, and his fist was suffused with a red light. He fiercely struck out, and sparks flew from his fist. The people nearby felt a wave of heat and had no choice but to retreat. Insignificant skill. Ron coldly snorted. He raised his white hand, and a black energy appeared in his palm. In that instant, a bone shield appeared out of thin air. Bone shield. Black energy swirled around the white bone shield, and a tyrannical cyclone was released. This was one of the differences between ancient necromancers and modern necromancers. Soul power. Boom! Highfirth's iron fist collided with Ron's bone shield, creating a powerful wave of fire that scattered in all directions, forcing everyone to take a step back. Ron raised a shield and blocked Firth High's attack. A deep fist imprint appeared on the bone shield, and the powerful fire burned the entire bone shield black, but Ron still managed to block it. What? No one had expected a necromancer to be able to block an attack, but Ron had done it. The scene was dead silent. Everyone's eyes widened exaggeratedly, and their jaws almost fell to the ground. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, no one would have believed that a useless necromancer could actually block the attack of an intermediate swordsman, even though High Firth didn't use a weapon. How? How is this possible? High Firth High was also stunned. He was the closest to Ron, so he could clearly feel the other's power. It was real power and definitely not below his. How is this possible? Kadena rubbed her beautiful big eyes to make sure she wasn't seeing things. Sister Shea, is he really a necromancer? He's not a swordsman pretending to be a necromancer, is he? Shea's face didn't have a trace of surprise. She had already experienced Ron's strength. She replied in a deep voice, "That's right. He is a necromancer. He is that strong." However, Shea also felt strange. This Ron's strength was a lot weaker than before. The Ron she met at that time could only be described as unfathomable. Although he only displayed the strength of a master, the fear he brought to Shea had already surpassed that of a master. Shea had also encountered this feeling before. It was when he was standing in front of the dean. It was the same feeling. Of course, Shea didn't know that she wasn't facing Ron at that time, but Homelin. The red-haired Charlotte couldn't hide the shock on her face. How is this possible? Aren't necromancers vulnerable? How could he block High Firth High's fist? Is this an illusion? Impossible. Necromancers can't have such powerful strength. It must be a fluke. High Firth High quickly recovered from the shock. He comforted himself and said to Ron, "You have some ability. You actually summoned a bone to block my attack. But I can tell you that this kind of trick is useless." The bone shield in Ron's hand wasn't an ordinary bone. The bone summoned through the power of the soul was harder than steel. He smiled and said, "I think you should be a swordsman. How about it? Don't you plan to use a weapon?" High Firth High raised his fist. His fist flashed with a raging flame. He grinned and said, "Why would I need a weapon to deal with you? Just my pair of fists is enough." After that, High Firth High no longer spoke nonsense. He raised his fist and crazily punched at Ron. Boom, boom, boom. In the fierce collision between High Firth High and Ron, there was a loud bang. The flames burned, sending out heat waves, and the bone shield in Ron's hand was riddled with holes. Ron, on the other hand, was in no hurry. He waved his shield so that it was impervious to wind and rain. No matter which angle Highfield attacked from, he cleverly resolved it. But what made High Firth High especially depressed was that just when he thought he was about to break the shield, the other party's black ass rose up and repaired the broken bone shield in an instant. This made High Firth High so angry that he almost died. The eyes of the surrounding students gradually became filled with astonishment. The appearance of Ron holding a bone shield completely subverted their understanding of necromancers. Ron's image in their eyes instantly became lofty. "Come on, Ron, come on. Beat him, get rid of High Firth High." The emotions of the people were very familiar with arousing. There was no exception to the mentality of admiring the strong. The voices cheering for Ron gradually increased. These voices grew louder and louder as High Firth High lost. High Firth High was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. Not to mention that he couldn't take down Leylin after so long. The other party still had a relaxed expression on his face. This made him want to vomit blood. No, this is definitely a fluke, a fluke. A necromancer can't have this kind of strength. This guy is so powerful. Kadena's beautiful eyes flashed as she exclaimed, "Now I understand why you were defeated by a necromancer. His strength is very good. Look at him handling the situation with ease." High Firth High isn't his opponent at all. Shea took a deep breath. His strength is far more than that. Several of High Firth High's comrades in the dormitory looked at each other. Among them, the red-haired girl, Charlotte, said, "Do you think we should rush up to help him? That's not good, right?" A brown-haired boy wearing half-body armor said hesitantly, "This is a duel between two people. The other party is just a necromancer. If we rush up like a swarm of bees, even if we win, it will be a disgrace. Look, is that guy still a necromancer?" Charlotte pointed to Ron in the field and said. Several people shook their heads. They all knew that Charlotte was telling the truth. The strength displayed by the other party was indeed not something a trash necromancer could possess. The brown-haired boy had to say, "However, if we intervene, young Master High Firth High won't be happy." He just told us that we don't need to intervene. Ishalat naturally remembered. She only sighed slightly and didn't speak. In the duel between High Firth High and Ron, flames flickered. High Firth High raised his strength to the highest level. His body was full of fire chi. From a distance, he looked like a man on fire. Under the cover of the flames, no one noticed that a trace of black gas was dissipating and spreading, competing with High Firth High's fire chi. Ron, who had been passively defending, was also angry. He coldly snorted, "Have you fought enough? If you have, it will be my turn. High Firth High. Trash, do you have the ability to fight back?" Ron, "Humph, I'll let you see how powerful I am." Ron was no longer polite. With a move of his palm, a powerful soul force shot out. Not long after, a white-boned spear appeared in his hand. "Look, he's taking out something new again." A student yelled, "It's a bone stick." Another said, "Can that thing hit people?" A girl asked timidly. "Of course, look at his bone shield. It's so powerful." The bone spear in Ron's hand stabbed out like lightning. The sharp tip was like a sharp blade, making a strong sound as it pierced through the air. Whoosh! High Firth High was greatly shocked. He was very anxious because he couldn't defeat Ron for a long time. The strength of the other party had also become unclear. He was like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. Any movement of Ron made him tremble with fear. Seeing the bone spear piercing towards him, the only command that flashed in High Firth High's mind was to retreat and avoid the other party's attack. He didn't dare to imagine what would happen if the bone spear pierced his body. Ron seemed to have anticipated his actions. With a flick of his bone spear, he made High Firth High spin in a circle. Then, the bone spear swept towards his feet. High Firth High didn't expect him to do this. He couldn't dodge in time and fell to the ground. The back of his head hit the ground, making a dong sound. Ha ha! High Firth High's fall was very funny, causing the surrounding students to laugh. Even Shea and Kadena had a smile on their faces. Ron's strength was far above his. He had this to play with High Firth High. In his heart, he had never regarded High Firth High as an opponent. High Firth High also had the same idea, but the result made everyone's jaws drop. Pornographic novels High Firth High's face had already swelled to the color of a pig's liver. He clenched his teeth and was about to get up and use his strongest O-Chi to fight Ron to the death. At this time, a cold bone spear was in front of him. Chapter 92. You lost. This sentence was no less than a clap of thunder in High Firth's ears. I lost. I lost. How is this possible? How could I lose to a good-for-nothing necromancer? How is this possible? High Firth's mind went blank. He had not yet recovered from the shock. High Firth, the red-haired girl, Ishalat, exclaimed and rushed over with her roommates. Ron coldly shouted, "Don't come over." As he said that, he raised the bone spear in his hand. Ishalat did not dare to move, but she looked at Ron with fierce eyes. Ron did not have a good impression of this beautiful girl. He turned to High Firth and coldly said, "See yellow novel. Firth, today's matter is over. I don't want you to provoke me again. Do you understand?" With that, Ron's hand moved, and the bone spear turned into a cloud of black gas, disappearing in front of everyone. Amazing! The surrounding students showed a blazing look in their eyes. In their eyes, Ron was no longer a good-for-nothing. He proved with his strength that necromancers were also very powerful. Sure enough, he won. Kadena murmured, "Is this still a necromancer? How come it's completely different from what I know?" Shea took a deep breath and said, "At first, I was as shocked as you. I thought that it was impossible for me to lose to a 15-year-old boy. Moreover, that boy was also a good-for-nothing necromancer. But the fact is, I was wrong, ridiculously wrong." Ron smiled coldly and strode away. The students consciously stepped aside to make a path. Some of the girls' eyes were full of sparkling stars, and their faces were full of worship. "High Firth, are you okay?" The red-haired girl, Ishalat, reached out to help High Firth up and softly said, anger, unwillingness, shame, all kinds of negative emotions toward his heart. His body was trembling, and his thoughts became extremely unstable. Finally, Highfield couldn't take it anymore. His humiliation had reached its limit. Suddenly, his hand flashed, and a dark gold longsword appeared in his hand. At this time, he stood up and shouted, "Ron, go to hell." No one expected this change. Highfirth had already made his move. The dark gold long sword emitted a strong light, making everyone unable to open their eyes. Blade of fire. Under the powerful pressure of Blade of Fire, the surrounding air burned. Highfirth was already dizzy. He was serious. He wanted to kill Ron. "Ron, be careful." At this moment, Shea could not help but exclaim. She did not know why, but she had an impulse to save him. Even without Shea's reminder, Ron had been vigilant behind him. Just like hunting in the mountains, he had never really left his back to others. He had always been paying attention. Ron coldly snorted, "Reckless thing, I thought you were really reflecting. Since that's the case, I won't be polite." A powerful black gas condensed in his hand and turned into a ball of light in an instant. The ball of light spun in Ron's hand. That ball of light was filled with the power of death. Death coil. Ron's eyes were cold. At this moment, he decided not to hold back. Boom! Highfirth's body was blasted in midair. His whole body flew out, and a trace of blood spurted out from his mouth, sprinkling a beautiful flower of blood. Crash! Crash! Highfield's body crashed into an old desk at the side, and the entire desk toppled over, making a loud noise. Highfirth, Ishalot did not care about anything else, and immediately ran over like a madwoman. Highfirth's face was like gold paper. A black soul force was constantly twining around his body, and he was unconscious. Ron coldly threw down a sentence, "Serves you right." After saying that, he no longer paid attention to the others and strode away. Kadena playfully looked at Shea. "Sister Shea, I didn't hear it. What did you say just now?" Shea's face turned red. She coldly snorted and said, "Yes, I was just reminding him. I don't want him to die in the hands of that trash Highfirth. If I, Shea, want revenge, I can't borrow the hands of others. That hateful guy Ron, if he wants to die, he can only die in my hands." After watching the show, the students dispersed one after another. These new students walked while excitedly discussing the matter just now. Ron's strength had left a deep impression in their hearts. "Oh, is that so?" Kadena smiled and said, "That hateful guy has already left. Sister Shea, should we chase after him?" "Chase, of course we have to chase. How can I let him go?" Shea said while gnashing her teeth. In a small independent bungalow in the Balarax Academy. This was the residence of the Academy's upper echelons. In the Academy, students who were strong and had good results were generally allocated residences by the Academy. Moreover, they were all high-class students' residences. It was completely different from the residences of ordinary students. In a luxuriously decorated hall, the furniture inside was made of high-class hardwood, revealing a grand European style everywhere. In the hall, a burly man with a gloomy face said in his unique low voice, "What the F***CK is going on?" On a luxurious large bed, Highfirth's eyes were tightly shut. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Beside him, a beautiful woman was carefully examining his body. Looking at her attire, it was obvious that she was a priest. The burly man's gaze swept to Fresno, who was beside him. The white-robed magician Fresno's heart trembled. He immediately stood up and said, "Boss, this has nothing to do with me." "Nothing to do with you?" The burly man looked up and glanced at him. Yes. Fresno was just replying when suddenly, the burly man stood up and raised a palm the size of a cattail leaf fan. Slap! Fresno was slapped in the face with a crisp sound. Fresno covered his face and said with a long face, Ugh, boss." The burly man pointed at him and said word by word, "My little brother was beaten up like this, and you say it has nothing to do with you?" The burly man was Highfirth's older brother, Hefels. He was a high-class knight and was known as the Tiger King. His mount was a fierce black tiger with long fangs. At this time, a white light floated up. The beautiful woman used a healing spell. Everyone's eyes were attracted by the white light, and they forgot to breathe. Heefles was so nervous that he was sweating. The white light flashed, and the beautiful priestess opened her eyes. She frowned and looked at Heefles helplessly, shaking her head. Heefles frowned. "Misoya, what's going on? Your healing spell doesn't seem to work." Misoya was the beautiful priestess. She was Heefles' wife, and they had just gotten married last month. According to seniority, High Firth should call her sister-in-law. Misoya shook her head and said in a clear voice, "High Firth wasn't injured, so my healing spell didn't work on him. He seems to have been cursed." "Curse? There's such a thing now?" Heefles was shocked and hurriedly asked, "Then what should we do?" Misoya pondered for a moment. "To remove the curse, we can use the priestess purification spell, but I haven't learned the purification spell yet. I may need to ask my mentor for help." "Purification spell?" Heefles nodded. "Okay, then go. Tell your mentor that I, Tiger King Heefles, owe him a favor." Misoya nodded and turned to leave. She had no way of dealing with High Firth's condition, so she could only ask her mentor for help. Heefles turned around and glanced at Frazino. He snorted coldly. "It's all your fault." He had slapped him to vent his anger, but now he had to figure out what the curse was about. "Boss, it wasn't me, it was Ron." Frazino took a step back and stammered. Heefles frowned. "Ron? Who is he? I recognize most of the people in the academy who have some strength, but I don't think I've heard of this name before. Could he be a new student?" Frazino replied, "Yes, boss. That Ron is a new student. He just came to the academy a few days ago." "All right. He's also a necromancer." Heefles' heart skipped a beat. He turned around abruptly. "What? Say that again. Necromancer? It was actually a necromancer who beat him up to this state?" "Yes. Yes." Frazino's confidence faltered. Heefles shook his head and slowly turned around. "Impossible. A necromancer can't possibly have such strength." Frazino panicked. "Boss, it's true." As he spoke, he recounted the whole story of the conflict between High Firth and Ron. "Boss, many of the new students of the scene saw it. It was that Ron who beat High Firth to this state. I'm not lying to you." Frazino added fuel to the fire as he spoke. After Heefles heard this, his face turned completely gloomy. "It doesn't matter if he's a necromancer or not. This new student is too arrogant. Everyone knows that High Firth is my younger brother. I won't let anyone who dares to touch my brother off. Not to mention an ordinary new student. Even if it's the Balrogs Academy's first Holy Knight Mocklin, I'll still meet him. Yes, tear this guy into pieces." Frazino cried out in agitation. He had been slapped by Heefles because of the incident with High Firth, so he hated Ron, who had caused all this. He did not dare to bare his fangs at Heefles. Heefles glanced at him. "I'm avenging my brother. Why are you so excited? What were you doing in the beginning?" Frazino was at a loss for words. After he sent Godely back, he had no interest in watching the duel between the two. In his mind, Ron was no match for High Firth at all. He was happy to be free and went straight back to his dormitory. At this moment, Heefles turned around, giving Frazino a fright. Heefles' face was distorted with anger. Frazino had never seen Heefles reveal such a terrifying expression. Chapter 93. Dealing with Firth High was a simple task. With Ron's current strength, it was a piece of cake. As for Firth High's current situation, he would be fine as long as he rested for a while. He took out the key and opened the door of the dormitory. As soon as the door opened, Ron was stunned by the scene in front of him. Search for the latest updates here. The dormitory was in a mess. There were sundries everywhere. Equipment, weapons, clothes, boots, and so on were scattered all over the floor. Fat Kid roared, "Lantry, where's my dagger? Hurry up and find it for me," Kid roared as he put on the ill-fitting clothes. Karachi was rummaging through the cabinets. "Brother, where's the magic earring I bought last time? Where did you throw it?" Pastor Rum was wearing heavy armor, half of his head peeking out from the collar. Lantry said, "Second, fifth brother, my shield, where's my shield? Didn't I put it here last time?" Seeing Ron open the door, those people turned their heads and stared at him like he was a monster. Pornographic novels. Ron's husband, the monk, was confused. He looked at his shocked roommates and asked, "What's wrong with you guys? Look at you guys. Are you going to fight?" Fat Kid couldn't believe his eyes. He quickly stepped forward and carefully checked Ron's body from head to toe. Then he patted him on the shoulder and finally pinched his face. I'm not dreaming, am I? You actually came back unscathed? Ron was even more confused. Why can't I come back? What the hell is going on here? At this time, Lantry also came over. Ron, didn't you say that Firth High was looking for you? Why did you come back unscathed? Ron didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why do you all seem to be hoping that something happened to me? Firth High was looking for me, but I'm fine. Karachi's eyes widened in disbelief. How can you be fine? Although High Firth is a freshman, he relies on his brother's influence to stir up trouble everywhere. I heard that he beat up a senior a few days ago. This guy is really bad. Ron was indignant, and then asked, by the way, why do you all look like you're facing a great enemy? Jita giggled. Isn't this all for you? We heard that High Firth was looking for you, so we immediately prepared to save you. Looking at the mess here, Ron understood everything. They were all wearing full sets of equipment to help him fight. Actually, their friendship wasn't that deep. After all, Ron had only known them for a few days. At this moment, the door of the girls' room creaked open, and Aurora, dressed in martial attire, walked out of the room. When she saw Ron, she was a little surprised and asked, Are you okay? Ron nodded. I'm fine. Aurora breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. Ron's eyes were a little red. He could feel his roommate's concern for him. He really didn't make a mistake coming to room 302. At this moment, Fatty Gid suddenly punched Ron's body. Ron cried out in pain. Ouch! Jita giggled and said, Not bad. You're fine. Ron couldn't help but feel angry. You just want to see if I'm injured. You don't have to use so much strength. I don't have a good physique like Lantry. I can't take a punch from you. Jita only smiled mischievously. By the way, why did High Firth let you go? Aurora asked. Ron shrugged. It's nothing. He talked to me about something and asked me to go to the duel arena. After that, he came back. Lantry was stunned. It's that simple, Ron replied. It's that simple. Right at this moment, the door to room 302 was suddenly pushed open, and a fiery red figure stumbled in. It was Man and I, who had a beautiful face and a devilish figure. At this moment, her face was filled with anxiety. Not good. Outside, there are a lot of people outside. They looked at each other. What do you mean by a lot of people? You guys look out the window? Manny said breathlessly. Aurora quickly ran to the window and pulled open the curtains. Everyone squeezed the window and looked out. At first glance, everyone was shocked. They saw a large group of people outside. They were as dark as a dark cloud. They were all senior students, and these people's faces were not unfamiliar to this group of senior students. Jita was shocked. What's wrong with them? What were they here for? Aurora's eyes were sharp. She saw the leader at a glance, and her pupils shrank. Heefles? This resounding name exploded in everyone's hearts. They all looked at Ron at the same time. Just now, his younger brother was looking for Ron, and now he was here with people. Could it be that this matter had something to do with him? Aurora asked directly, Ron, did you do something to Firth High? This was also the question in everyone's hearts. When she asked this question, Aurora also felt that it was ridiculous. Ron was a useless necromancer. How could he do anything to Firth High, who was an intermediate professional? Even if he wanted to, he didn't have the ability. It was more likely that the situation was reversed. However, the next answer surprised everyone. Ron shook his head and said, It's nothing. That guy was too arrogant. I just taught him a lesson. Well, that guy wanted to sneak up on me, so I knocked him out. He'll wake up in 2 days. The shock on everyone's faces turned into sluggishness. Ron touched his head. What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? Then, he touched Jita's forehead. Second, fifth brother, how are you? Do you have a fever? Or are you not feeling well? Jita angrily slapped his hand away. You're the one who's having a fever. Everyone's gaze gradually changed. How could someone who could knock Firth High unconscious be an ordinary person? Manny stuttered as she asked, Ron, did you really do this? Ron nodded. Yes, Aurora took a deep breath. This is really too unbelievable. As she said that, she looked Ron up and down a few times. She thought that this guy's strength was a mystery. She had to find out more about him when she had the chance. The ranking battle in 3 months. Downstairs, a few hundred students had surrounded the entire dormitory building. Below them was a huge mass of blackheads. Their faces were filled with anger. An audacious new student had actually beaten up Boss Heifels' own brother. How could this be allowed? They had to teach this arrogant guy a good lesson so that he would have eyes when he walked around the campus in the future. He would know who he could offend and who he could not. Frazino had a flattering expression on his face. He was completely different from the arrogant person he had been in front of Ron earlier. Boss, how about we rush in now and catch that guy called Ron and beat him up? Heifels snorted coldly and rolled his eyes at him. Are you stupid? Rush in? With so many people using their chi and magic, this building will definitely collapse. When that happens, are you going to pay for it, or am I? Can't you use your brain? Frazino was scolded by Firth High until he could not raise his head. His face was red as he said softly, Then what do we do? What do we do? High Furs sneered. Force him out. I don't believe that this guy is a coward. If he really is a coward and forces me into a corner, I'll find him even if I have to tear down this house. Yes, yes, yes. Frazino nodded his head like a chicken pecking at rice. At this moment, 2 graceful figures appeared at the back of the group. One was dressed in leisurely leather armor, while the other was dressed in soft magic robes. The 2 great beauties stood under the bright sunlight, looking very lovely and moving. Shea snorted coldly. I knew it. Heifels won't let this go so easily. If that's the case, then that guy isn't Heifels, Kadena sighed. Poor little necromancer. He's in trouble now. With so many students here, even a master would have a headache. Shea rolled her eyes and thought for a while before saying seriously, If that's the case, let's go back and call for help. I don't believe that Heifels can be a tyrant in the Balrafax Academy. Kadena looked at her as if she was looking at a stranger. Shea touched her face hesitantly. There was nothing wrong. She hurriedly asked, What's wrong? Is there something on my face? Kadena reached out and touched Shea's beautiful and smooth forehead. She nodded and said, Yes, you're not sick. This means that you're speaking normally now. Shea rolled her eyes at her. You're the one who's sick. Kadena looked at Shea seriously for a while. After a long time, she suddenly burst out, Sister Shea, have you fallen in love with that guy named Ron? Shea heard this and almost couldn't catch her breath. You, what did you say? I fell in love with him? I fell in love with him? Kadena tilted her head. That's possible. The Shea I know has never been like this. Why do you seem to have changed today? Usually you're not interested in fighting and killing between students, but now you're so interested in a new student. Let me guess. Did you lose to Ron before? Although you're not convinced, you're convinced in your heart and can't help but fall in love with him. Nonsense. Shea's face turned red, and she immediately denied it. Kadena smiled slyly. Sister Shea, I've read a lot of psychology books. They say that when a woman is defeated by a man, it's like she's been raped. She can't help but feel like she's been conquered. In the end, she can't help but fall in love with the rapist. By the way, there are many examples like this. In the legend, the wife of the great sword sage Shaikizi was also a proud and arrogant person. After being defeated by him, she couldn't help but fall in love with the sword sage Shaikizi. Katina was unceasingly touting her research theories, but Shaya's face was flushed red. Go, go, go. What do you mean by conquering or raping? See if I don't tear your mouth apart. Am I, Shaya, the kind of person who would casually fall in love with someone? There's already someone's shadow in my heart. Shea was talking about the first paladin of the Balrog's Academy, Mocklin. However, Mocklin liked Kadena. Shea took a deep breath. The shame of failure must be washed away by me. Before that, I won't allow anyone to hurt him. If that's the case, my revenge will be meaningless. Kadena nodded like a chicken pecking rice. Yes, yes. Sister Shea has to take revenge herself. She can't let others do it. Chapter 94. Heifels closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Suddenly, his tiger-like eyes snapped open. His two bell-like eyes shone brightly. He took a step forward and roared into the sky. "Ron, get out here, or I'll kill my way in and tear you to pieces." Heefles was a burly man. His roar was like a lion's roar, shaking the roof tiles. Even the dust on the mottled walls rustled down. The other freshmen living in the dormitory trembled in fear. At this moment, the door opened with a bang. Ron walked out expressionlessly, followed by the students of dormitory 302. Aurora, Gid, Manny, and finally the pale-faced Lonsim. Heefles narrowed his eyes slightly. His gaze swept past Ron's face and paused for a second. He then swept his gaze towards Aurora, a trace of seriousness flashing through his eyes. He hadn't thought that Ron would be with Aurora. However, he soon understood. Dormitory 302 was a notorious gathering camp for losers. It would be strange if a necromancer wasn't assigned there. This guy is very strong. Ron didn't need Homeland's reminder. He already knew that this guy called Heefles in front of him was a formidable opponent. The most troublesome thing was that he was actually Firth High's brother. "Heefles, what do you want?" Aurora asked with a straight face. Heefles waved his hand, and all the students quieted down. They all followed his lead. "Damn it, when can I have such power?" Fatty Gid's eyes were filled with envy. Heefles, who had hundreds of followers, was very formidable in his eyes. "You're on?" Heefles ignored Aurora. He walked up to Ron as if he was looking at a monster. He sized him up and asked coldly. That's right. It would be a lie to say that Ron wasn't afraid in the face of the black mass of students in front of him. However, he was also someone who had gone through a lot. He could still force himself to remain calm in this situation. "You're the one who beat up Firth High like this?" Heefles asked, rolling his eyes. Ron quickly calmed down. His hand slowly touched his own space bag. He slowly raised his head and fearlessly stared at the murderous gaze of the other. He smiled faintly. "That's right, that guy asked for it. Haha." Heefles suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed. His owl-like laughter echoed in the silent sky. After a long time, his laughter stopped. His face changed into a sinister expression. He said in a deep voice, "What a reckless guy. This is the first time I've seen someone so calm when surrounded by so many people. Although I admire your courage, but..." His gaze suddenly fixed on Ron. "But you shouldn't have hurt my brother." Now, there's nothing more to say. Heefles roared, "Do it, swish." All the students pulled out the weapons in their hands. There were all kinds of weapons in their hands. There were magic staffs, scepters, swords, bows, and so on. These students all obeyed Heefles' orders and prepared for battle. "Kill!" Someone shouted. At this time, the surrounding students were ready to pounce. "Everyone stop!" A clear voice rang out. A clear and melodious voice shouted. Aurora had taken out a bow from her space bag at some point in time. On the curved bow, an arrow condensed by magic was shining with a faint light. The bow of the tree elves, a dark gold weapon. When it appeared, it gave all the students a big fright. Aurora's face was cold. "Who dares to move? My bow doesn't have eyes." A trace of fear appeared on the faces of the students. The bow of the tree elves was not unfamiliar to them. Thinking back, Aurora had used this bow to establish the reputation of the Academy's #1 archer. Although she was not good at close combat, in this limited distance, whoever moved would die first. Once her arrow was released, it would not turn back. None of the students dared to breathe too loudly. They were afraid that if they breathed too heavily, Aurora would treat them as enemies. They did not have absolute confidence in dodging her arrow. Aurora slowly swept the bow towards the group of people in front of her. The moment the bow of the tree elves was aimed at them, everyone took a step back. Hummel and Shadow stood beside Ron. Aside from Ron himself, no one else could see him. They could only see him twirling his beard with a satisfied expression. A fight like this was interesting. "Ron, this little girl is quite good to you," Hummelin said with a smile. Right now, only she can suppress this group of people. But then a trace of doubt flashed across Hummelin's face. "But she gives me a very familiar feeling." "That feeling is very strange," Hummelin mumbled, but he couldn't say why. He just felt that it was strange. Heefles' face darkened. "Aurora, this has nothing to do with you. Move aside. I'll deal with you later." Aurora smiled. "Sorry, Heefles, but this time I can't stay out of it. Ron is a member of Dorm 302. Aurora's words gave Kid and the others great confidence. Yes, Ron is a member of Dorm 302. How can we let you mess around? We are friends. If we live together. If we die together. Come, Heefles, I'm not afraid of you, Kid and Lantry roared. They shouted until their faces were red and their necks were thick. They looked like they were going to fight to the death. But in the face of the black mass of people, they looked a little weak. Only Lansom's face was pale, his body was trembling, and his lips were trembling. He couldn't say a word. Heefles' eyes were like a poisonous snake's staring at Aurora. It seems that Aurora is determined to fight us to the end. I just don't know what benefits you can get from this. Aurora smiled faintly and didn't answer. Heefles said, Your bow is very powerful, but no matter how powerful it is, it can only injure or kill one person. Even if you're fast, it can only kill 2 or 3 people. We have hundreds of people here. How many can you kill? Everyone knew this, but no one dared to be the first to rush to their deaths. Heefles naturally understood this. He smiled. It seems that I have to do it myself. But I don't know, Aurora, after a holiday, how much did your dirty novels increase? How much did your strength increase? Aurora's heart sank. This guy was going to do it himself. As he spoke, Heefles slowly took off his jacket, revealing his strong and muscular body. He patted the dimensional bag at his waist and took out something from it. It was a spike club. This spike club was Heefles' weapon. It had been upgraded to the highest level, dark gold rank. The spikes on the spike club emitted a faint golden light. When the people of room 302 saw the spikes on the club, they all shuddered. Heefles put his hands together. A strange energy appeared out of thin air. It was like a stream of light sprinkling on the ground. At this time, a mysterious magic formation appeared on the verdant ground. It's Heefles is summoning his mount, exotic beast, long-fanged tiger. The students cried out in alarm. Even Aurora's eyes showed a trace of anxiety. Heefles was a knight. With the help of his mount, his strength would rise to another level. This way, he would be even more difficult to deal with. What do we do? Aurora and Manny, who was ranked second in strength, looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with helplessness. Even a usually heartless fatty Gid was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. Mommy, this guy is so scary. Ron's face was also solemn. Today's matter was caused by him alone. These roommates were all forced into this conflict. He felt a little guilty. Level 6 exotic beast, long-fanged tiger. Ron's eyes were fixed on the tall and majestic figure. He clenched the azure grade pig bone staff in his hand. Let me see how powerful you are. Heefles' summoning magic was coming to an end. The long-fanged tiger's figure appeared out of thin air. It was a huge black tiger. When it was on all fours, it was over 2 meters tall. Its body was suffused with white stripes. Its 2 long fangs were like sharp swords, shining with a cold light. It had 4 strong and powerful claws and a long tail that constantly swayed behind its back. A knight's mount was a tamed exotic beast. These exotic beasts were usually obtained through 2 methods. The first was to buy them. People would sell sealed exotic beasts through various trading companies or auctions. As long as one signed a contract, they could obtain them. However, the price was outrageous. Exotic beasts of level 5 and above were already sold for sky-high prices. The second method was to go to some places where exotic beasts roamed and personally capture them. After capturing them, one would seal them. However, this method was extremely dangerous. The slightest mistake could lead to death. This was also the reason why exotic beasts were so expensive. Good fellow. Heefles patted the long-fanged tiger's huge head and mounted it beautifully. His face was brimming with confidence. The strength of the exotic beast, coupled with his own strength, was definitely not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. He looked at Aurora with a trace of mockery in his eyes. Aurora clenched her silver teeth. Although she really didn't want to admit it, she knew that she had indeed lost. Heefles, who was riding on an exotic beast, was stronger than her. This kind of battle was a sure-death situation. If they continued to fight, they would lose without a doubt. Should I put down my weapon and let he-fools take Ron away? Or should I fight to the death? Did they have hundreds of people other than he-fools? Aurora sighed. Just when she was about to say a few soft words, a series of hurried footsteps sounded. Ta, what's going on? Why does it seem like a lot of people are coming here? He-fools' group of students were puzzled. Their formation was also a little chaotic. Not far away, a group of black figures appeared. The number of people in this group was not inferior to he-fools'. The leader was a valiant female knight wearing a fiery red battle robe. A bell-like voice sounded. The beautiful female knight in front smiled and said, "He-fools, we finally meet. This is the first time we meet in the new semester, right?" The more Ron looked at the leader, the more familiar he felt. When that person came closer, his eyes gradually widened. Chapter 95. Ron was a little surprised to see Shea. Shea now had a more mature flavor and was even more beautiful than before. When Ron's gaze fell on Kadena, who was beside Shea, his body suddenly stiffened. She was a woman so beautiful that it was suffocating. She had a head of long azure hair and a light blue magician's robe wrapped around her petite body. A pair of white hands that were as white as jade stretched out from the long sleeves of the robe. Her face was as fair as carved jade and as smooth as milk. Suddenly, Ron's heart had a trace of impulse. He wanted this woman to be his wife. Ron himself did not know why he had such an idea. Hamelin smiled. What a woman who is born to bring calamity to the country and the people. Such a woman is not something that an ordinary person can have. It can even be said that her fate is not even in her own hands. Ron asked puzzledly, "Grandpa, what do you mean?" Hamelin did not directly answer him. Instead, he smiled and said, "Ron, now is not the time for you to think about these things. What you should think about now is how to improve your strength as quickly as possible and become a powerhouse in the eyes of tens of thousands of people." Ron took a deep breath and nodded solemnly. When he looked at Kadena again, there was not much passion in his eyes, only calmness. Seeing Shea, even he-fools could not help but be a little moved. It was easy to deal with Ron, but this Shea was different. When his gaze swept past Kadena, who was beside Shea, his eyes could not help but reveal a trace of strong possessiveness. Kadena was extremely uncomfortable under his naked gaze. She could not help but twitch her cute little nose and snort coldly to express her dissatisfaction. He-fools quickly calmed down. The most important thing now was to figure out their intentions. Shea and Kadena did not bring so many people here for sightseeing. He frowned. "What are you doing here?" Before Shea could speak, Kadena said, "Then what are you doing here? Is the Balarax Academy owned by your family? You can come, but we can't?" After being reprimanded by Kadena, He-fools' face turned pale. However, he still had good self-restraint and swallowed his anger. In front of this beautiful and cute Princess Kadena, no one could really get angry. He-fools looked at Shea. Shea smiled and pointed at Ron. "I have a small problem with that necromancer that I need to resolve. Today, I found out that he's also studying in the academy, so I immediately came looking for him. Who would have thought that you, he-fools, would be one step ahead of us?" As soon as these words came out, everyone's face revealed an extremely astonished expression, especially the few people in dormitory 302. Their eyes were wide open as they stared at Ron with all their might. They didn't know how this little freshman who had just arrived at the academy could be related to the senior boss Shea. Shea was born beautiful and powerful. In addition, she was someone who came from the first-place dorm in the academy ranking tournament. She was very popular among the students and had many followers. Coupled with Kadena, who was a disaster to the country, the two of them pulled together a large group of people in a short time. Aurora frowned slightly. She moved closer to Ron and asked in a low voice, "You know her?" Ron thought for a moment and replied, "I've met her once, but I'm not too familiar with her. Stay away from her. This woman is not a good person." Aurora clearly did not like Shea. Ron gave a faint, "Oh." This woman had accepted Gerald's mission to capture him, so he did not have a good impression of her. However, He suddenly remembered that the aqua blue sword St. Corbett's granddaughter was also called Shea. She was also studying at the Balarax Academy, but he did not know if it was her. Fatty Jeed winked at him. Ron, you're too great. You actually have the powerful and beautiful Miss Shea backing you. The eyes of the people around them were also filled with envy. How could Heefles not understand that Shea was biased towards Ron? You don't have to bring so many people to solve a small problem, right? He immediately snorted. Miss Shea, this Ron used dishonorable means to frame my younger brother, High Firth. Now that you've brought so many people, are you trying to go against me? Ron had defeated High Firth in front of everyone, but Heefles had deliberately ignored this point and called it a frame. In other words, he simply did not admit that Ron had defeated High Firth. Shea smiled. Heefles, this sentence seems to be wrong. I was also there at that time. I clearly remember that Ron defeated that idiot Heefles in front of all the freshmen. Sorry, although he is your younger brother, please forgive me for using this word. What? Everyone simultaneously sucked in a breath of cold air. Guangming had defeated High Firth, which meant that he was at least equivalent to an intermediate professional. This trash necromancer was actually this strong? Aurora's beautiful eyes flashed as she heard this. She also found Ron much more pleasing to the eye. Although I don't know how he did it, but if it's like this, our dormitory's ranking battle will be a little more assured. Aurora, he thought in her heart. Heefles' face alternated between red and white. His lie had been exposed in front of everyone, making him unable to back down. He snorted. Now my younger brother is still lying in bed, unconscious. I still have to ask him what's going on. Shea, I think everything should be based on first come, first served, right? Shea smiled. First come, first served, well said. I also agree with this. That's good. My grudge with him happened a few months ago. According to the principle of first come, first served, Heefles, I think you should step aside. Heefles could no longer bear it and roared. Shea, don't go too far. Do you really think I'm afraid of you? Shea pulled out a one-handed knight sword from her space bag and sneered. It's hard to say who's afraid of who. This lady has been fighting since the first day of school until now. I'm not afraid of anyone. Swish, swish, swish. Seeing Shea pull out her sword, the students behind her all pulled out their weapons. Kadena also took out her magic staff, ready to fight to the death. Kill! Kill! Kill them! Firth High and the others were not to be outdone either. They all pulled out their weapons, and in an instant, the atmosphere of a great battle was ignited. All kinds of elements filled the small space, filling it up. Ron, you're really something. You've only been in the academy for a few days, and these seniors are already fighting because of you. Lantry said enviously. When will I be able to write such an awe-inspiring pornographic novel? That'll be great. Kid patted Ron's shoulder heavily with his fat hand. Brother, we'll be under your protection from now on. Who told you to be the boss? The students shouted at each other, not daring to make a move for the time being. Even people like Shea and Heefles were a little worried. A fight of this scale would definitely alarm the academy. If he ordered a fight, no one would be able to bear the responsibility. Shea and Heefles are fighting. This news spread like the wind throughout the academy. In an instant, the entire academy was in an uproar. Those who were partial to the fight, those who were here to watch the show, all kinds of people ran out. More and more people gathered. Aurora, look, that's the boss of Class 3. He's here too, Lantry said to Aurora. An old magician walked over with a group of students expressionlessly and stood by Shea's side. Shea nodded to him as a greeting. Look, another group of people is here. Kid yelled. He was so happy that he danced with joy. A scene like this was rare, even in the Balarax Academy. Ron looked and saw about 300 to 400 people slowly walking over in a line. They all had tense faces and serious expressions, and the one leading them was actually a woman. Sister Shea. The group of people stood directly beside Shea, and the girl greeted her with a smile. Shea nodded. Sister Hera, thank you. Sure enough, you are worthy of being a good sister. The girl called Hera smiled, revealing 2 small canine teeth. When her eyes fell on Ron, she was clearly stunned. She smiled kindly at Ron and nodded in greeting. Who is she? Does she know me? Ron smiled back at her, but he was puzzled. Heefles' expression became more and more unsightly. He could clearly see that more and more people were gathering around Shea. On his side, other than the few familiar bosses who had appeared at the beginning, there weren't many people left. Some of the bosses who had come were shocked when they saw that the one who had clashed with them was Shea. They didn't dare to offend either side, so after thinking it over, they could only choose to remain neutral. This made Heefles very angry. He also keenly felt that in terms of connections in the academy, he was still far behind the other party. Not to mention Mocklin, he couldn't even compare to Shea. The influence of the dormitory of the academy ranking tournament's first place wasn't just for show. Many people had a wait-and-see attitude because of Shea's reputation. Karachi's eyes were full of excitement. Ron, look, there are more and more people on our side. Heefles will have a good show to watch. Our side? Ron smiled faintly. He thought that Shea couldn't be considered to be on his side, even though he didn't know what Shea's motive was. Frazino's calves were trembling, and his handsome face was filled with fear. He quietly moved closer to Heefles and said in a trembling voice, Boss, the situation isn't good. More and more people are gathering around that woman. Frazino didn't continue. Heefles' heart had already sunk to the bottom of the valley. Looking at the current situation, it was obvious that he was the loser. Shea's followers were increasing, while his side was decreasing. Some of them even left directly, not wanting to go against Shea and the others. In terms of popularity, Heefles thought that he was strong. Not to mention Shea, even Mocklin from the Academy ranking tournament's first dormitory was confident that he could fight him. However, in terms of popularity, the difference was too great. Shea had a proud smile on her face. Heefles, what do you think? Looking at you guys, it seems like you don't have much of a chance of winning. Heefles took a deep breath, and his eyes revealed a ferocious glint. Shea smiled and looked back at him, not to be outdone. After a long time, Heefles glared fiercely at Ron and said in a low voice, Let's go. Heefles is scared. Ha! Seeing Heefles cower, the morale of the students on Shea's side rose, and they all started to clamor. Amidst the boos of the students, Heefles angrily left with his people. Ron then said, Firth High's injuries aren't serious. He'll be fine after fainting for a while. Chapter 96. Shea smiled and said loudly to the students who had come to support her, Sorry for the trouble today. Shea would like to thank everyone on behalf of our dorm. That's what we should do. You're welcome, Sister Shea. If there's anything, just say the word. The students enthusiastically greeted Shea and left. The girl named Hera didn't leave. Instead, she slowly approached Ron. After a while, she asked in a hesitant tone, Excuse me, are you Scott Moody? Ron felt that this question was a little strange. He shook his head. Sorry, I'm not Moody. I'm Ron. The girl named Hera chewed on this name, and a trace of disappointment flashed across her eyes. Oh, sorry, I mistook you for someone else. It's okay, Hera. What are you doing here? Do you know this person? While speaking, Shaya walked over. Her pretty face didn't have a trace of expression, and behind her was her little follower, Katina. Hera smiled and shook her head. I don't know him. I just felt that he looked like someone. I didn't expect that I mistook him for someone else. So that's how it is. Shaya laughed. It's normal for people to look alike. Hera nodded. Sister Shea. I'll take my leave then. Shea said goodbye to Hera. Immediately after, a sharp gaze locked onto Ron. However, there was a trace of complexity in that gaze. What do you want? As the boss of Dorm 302, Aurora naturally had to protect Ron. At this moment, she felt that she had to stand up. Shea frowned. Aurora, this has nothing to do with you. Aurora didn't budge an inch. Ron's business is my business. Shea was about to explode when blood rushed to her head. At this moment, Ron calmly interjected. Shea, you're Shea, right? Why are you looking for me? For some reason, when Shea faced Ron, her anger disappeared. She took a deep breath. Ron, I want to talk to you, Ron nodded. Don't go. Aurora pulled Ron and said, This woman doesn't have any good intentions. Ron turned his head and happened to meet Aurora's concerned gaze. His heart skipped a beat. At this moment, Ron did something that even he didn't dare to believe. He opened his arms and gently hugged Aurora. Two. Jita, Lantry, Karachi, and the rest of the people from room 302 were petrified. They thought to themselves, Ron, how dare you hug our boss Aurora? Aurora didn't even bat an eyelid at the boys in the past few years in the academy. She hadn't even let anyone hold her hand. Aurora only felt that her body was fixed. She wanted to move, but she couldn't. She didn't know why, but Ron's thin and weak body emitted a calming warmth. Shea naturally saw this scene and couldn't help but feel a little jealous. She was shocked. What's wrong with me? Why do I feel like my heart is beating faster? She shook her head and shook off the absurd feeling in her mind. Her face returned to its usual cold expression. Ron, I think we should go. Some words shouldn't be heard by outsiders. She emphasized the word outsider. Ron hugged Aurora in his arms. A faint fragrance seeped into his nostrils. He smiled and said, Aurora, thank you. Don't worry, it'll be fine. After saying that, he gently let go of her. Oh no, Aurora is going to explode. Jita and the others knew her temper. Every time before Aurora got angry, she would appear extremely calm. The expected volcano didn't erupt. Aurora smiled sweetly and said, Okay, Ron, be careful. She then glared fiercely at Shea. Shea, I'm warning you. If you dare to touch a single hair on Ron, I won't let you go. Ron left with Shea. Kadena bowed to them and hurriedly left as well. Only the people from room 302 were left standing there. Lantry whispered to Jita, Is boss Aurora stupid? Why is she just standing there and not moving? Jita smiled and said, You don't know. You can't guess a woman's thoughts. From what I see, boss Aurora is most likely in love with Ron. I just don't know how Ron managed to capture boss Aurora's heart. Before Kid could finish his sentence, he felt a sharp pain in his head. Ouch! He squatted down in pain, only to see that Aurora had appeared beside the heartless fatty at some point in time. She had given him a hard knock on the head. Aurora showed a fierce expression. What are you looking at? Go back to your room. Seeing that Aurora was putting on the airs of a boss, the few fellows immediately became like mice that had seen a cat. They shrunk back wretchedly and agreed before returning to their own rooms. Aurora saw that there was no one around, and her face became hot. She looked like a shy little girl. Hey, Ron, you actually hugged me in front of everyone. It's so embarrassing. How am I going to be the boss of room 302 in the future? In an open area behind the mountains of Balrafax Academy, the grass here grew to the height of half a person. It seemed to be a deserted place. Shea brought Ron here. Ron became vigilant. Why did you bring me here? Shea turned around abruptly and stared at Ron with her beautiful eyes. You think I have nothing better to do? I brought you here for revenge, of course. Revenge? Ron was stunned. Do I have a grudge against you? No. Shea's eyes widened and a trace of resentment flashed across her face. She looked Ron up and down and said coldly, Yes, it seems that you have almost forgotten that you defeated me. But I remember it all the time. Until one day, I will defeat you and wash away my shame. So that's why? Ron tilted his head and said, It's not a big deal. Grandpa Homelin once said that winning and losing is a very normal thing. Even as a strong person, it's impossible to only win and not lose. You have to know that there's always someone better than you. No one can stand at the top. Isn't it normal to lose? Shea asked with a tense face. Who is Grandpa Homelin? Oh no. Ron knew that he had let the cat out of the bag, so he quickly tried to smooth things over. Nothing, I mean, you don't have to take these things to heart. Impossible. Shea coldly snorted and said in a clear voice, No matter what, I want to fight with you and wash away the shame of the past. She patted the space bag at her waist, and a cold light appeared. Ron took a closer look and saw that it was a shining, one-handed nightsword. Ron frowned. Do you have to fight? Shea took a step forward to show her determination. Ron glanced at Kadena and asked, Then what about her? Kadena smiled. I'm just here to watch the show. I won't get involved in the matter between you and Sister Shea." She ran away quickly and sat on a large green rock. A pair of exquisite deerskin boots could be seen under her fluttering skirt. She sat on the rock calmly, with a faint smile on her face. Shea glanced at Ron. "You can rest assured now." To be honest, Ron did not want to fight with Shea. He had already forgotten that Shea had accepted a mission to capture him. More importantly, Ron was indebted to Shea's grandfather, who had saved his life before. Ron was thinking about how to tell her about Corbett. Perhaps he could turn the enemy into a friend. Shea saw that Ron was still dawdling and became impatient. She did not want to waste any more words with Ron. She took a step forward and stabbed her sword at Ron's throat. Wait. Ron did not expect her to attack so suddenly and was shocked. He reacted quickly. His space bag flashed, and a green bone staff appeared in his hand. He blocked Shea's night sword. Ron said anxiously, "Wait, listen to me." Shea's face was gloomy. She did not want to waste any more words with Ron. Instead, she attacked fiercely. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The sound of the night sword cutting through the air was extremely ear-piercing. It even brushed past Ron's scalp a few times and cut off a few strands of hair. He was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat. If Shea's sword had been just a little bit off, his head would have been separated from his body. Shea pressed on step by step, forcing Ron to swallow back the words that were about to come out of his mouth. He was fully focused on dealing with Shea's sword moves. How interesting. Kadena rested her chin on her hand and looked at the two of them with interest. What do they look like now? It's like a couple fighting. Sister Shea hasn't used any fighting spirit at all. Kadena let out a chuckle. Shea's face was burning. Her little thoughts were discovered by Kadena. She could not maintain her face and shouted angrily, "Ron, if you don't make a move, I won't be polite anymore." With that, Shea's body moved, and a powerful fighting spirit surged out from her body. Boom! Flames exploded on Shea's body. With a powerful aura, Ron was forced to retreat a few steps. He looked up in shock. Shea's body emitted a raging fire, and the flames seemed to have a substance that was constantly burning her body. She stood in the fire, like a goddess covered with flames of lust. She said indifferently, "Ron, use your true strength. If you don't, you will die under my sword in the next moment." With that, Shea held her sword and approached step by step. At this time, Hummelin said, "Ron, fight with her. The current you is no longer the child who could be bullied. Your strength is not weaker than hers." Chapter 97. Shea's relentless advance actually aroused Ron's fighting spirit. He waved the bone staff in his hand, and a powerful soul force surrounded his body. Black gas filled the air, giving people a feeling of unreality. Ron raised his head, and his eyes were filled with a faint green light. "As you wish, Shea. Let's have a showdown." Shea smiled. "That's how it should be." A powerful black gas swirled around Ron's hand. Even Kadena, who was far away, could feel an extremely powerful force. What kind of power is this?" Kadena's beautiful eyes widened, and a trace of astonishment appeared on her fairy-like face. This kind of power was different from any she was familiar with. Kadena recovered from her astonishment and thought with lingering fear. What a powerful power! No wonder Sister Shea was defeated. This power is too terrifying. It seems to have a hint of evil. Ron muttered something, and not long after, he waved his hand. Ka! Ka! Sounds came from the ground, and eerie white skulls scrambled to crawl out. Skeleton warriors. Summoning skeleton warriors was Ron's specialty. There were a lot of them, and they were very fast. It was just that their defense was a little weak. These repulsive skeletons. Shea didn't dare to lower her guard in front of a row of evil spirits that crawled out from hell. She had already experienced the strength of these skeletons. Flaming Edge. A powerful flaming light shot out and swept towards the skeleton warriors in front of her. With a crash, the powerful flaming energy wreaked havoc, and a large number of skeleton warriors were swept away. Ron shook his head in his heart. The skeleton warriors were still too weak. They didn't feel it when they met someone weaker than them, but once they met an opponent of the same level or stronger than them, the skeleton warriors' disadvantage quickly became apparent. Shea continued to pursue, swinging her flaming edge one after another, and those frail skeleton warriors fell in droves. Skeleton warrior. Ron didn't want to be outdone. This time, he decided to summon even more powerful skeleton warriors. One by one, the heavily armored skeleton warriors crawled out of the ground with giant axes in their hands. They howled angrily, their hollow eyes glowing with a faint green light. Kadena was dumbfounded. These guys are so strong. She was a little worried that Sister Shea was in danger. Shea furrowed her brows. Just from their appearance, the so-called skeleton warriors were even more difficult to deal with than the skeleton warriors. This was evident from their heavy armor. Charge! Ron waved the bone staff in his hand, and the skeleton warriors rushed toward Shea as if they had received an order. They were undying warriors that had returned from hell. They had no fear, no pain, and no fear of death. Silver-winged Pegasus. Shea finally stopped hiding her strength. She was a knight, and only with a mount could she display her full strength. Shea clasped her hands together and chanted a summoning spell. A silver light lit up and spread out in front of Ron. The light was so dazzling that he couldn't open his eyes. In the haze, Ron saw the light gradually grow bigger and turn into the shape of a horse. Silver-winged Pegasus. Ron's heart trembled. This silver-winged Pegasus was still fresh in his memory. He sneered. So what if you have a mount? Watch me kill your mount. Black gas swirled in his palm, gradually forming the shape of a spear. This was Ron's most powerful single-target spell, Bone Spear. Go to hell. Ron waved his hand, and the bone spear in his hand pierced out, aiming directly for Shea's mount, the silver-winged Pegasus. Shea flew up and mounted the horse. At this moment, her confidence was multiplied. Defensive stance. Shea raised her shield with one hand, and the silver-winged Pegasus' 2 legs were in the air, its wings flapping. A perfect defensive stance was executed just like that. Boom! The powerful bone spear pierced the silver-winged Pegasus' body, but it was as if it had hit a wall of air. The bone spear went in an inch and couldn't go any further. A simple yet not simple move had dissolved Ron's bone spear into nothingness. Damn it! Ron clenched his fists. At this moment, he was truly enraged. He copied Shea and rode on the skeletal warrior's back like a horse, charging directly at the opponent. Boom! 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 Ron and Shea began a fierce battle. Both sides went back and forth, neither giving way to the other. The competition of strength between the two caused the ground to tremble slightly. Streaks of brilliant power spread in all directions. Wherever it went, the grass was scorched and the ground was char-black. Oh my God! Kadena sat on a large green rock, her beautiful big eyes widening. Is this still the necromancer I know? He's actually so powerful? He's tied with Sister Shea? Others didn't know, but Kadena was well aware. Ever since Shea was defeated by Ron, she seemed to have been greatly agitated. She trained like her life depended on it, madly torturing herself and challenging her limits. In just a few months, her strength had increased by a lot. Kadena even felt that Sister Shea wasn't much inferior to Mocklin. Even so, she was still entangled with this necromancer, and couldn't even gain much of an advantage. Ron's combat experience had also been honed. He knew what to do at what time. His strange necromancy magic often made Shea flustered. In all fairness, Ron's strength was a bit lower than Shea's. Although they were both at the high rank of warrior, Ron's strength was much lower than Shea's. However, he relied on his rich combat experience and strange necromancy magic to force a tie. Boom! Shea stabbed out with her sword. Flames scattered in all directions, forcing Ron, who was holding a bone shield, to retreat. Ron rode on the skeleton warrior and retreated a few steps, almost falling. The skeleton warrior behind him suddenly blocked his retreat. Ron gritted his teeth. Go! Shea didn't even have time to catch her breath before the wolf-like skeleton warriors pounced on her again. Her almond eyes widened. Die, all of you! At this moment, the fiery aura around Shea's body surged. Even the silver-winged Pegasus seemed to be draped in a flaming cape. She let out a delicate cry and urged her warhorse to charge at the skeleton warriors. Assault! The silver-winged Pegasus's front hooves soared into the air and stomped on a skeleton warrior. The skeleton warrior's sternum shattered, and it turned into a cloud of black smoke and disappeared. Shea waved her shield and forced a skeleton warrior to her left to retreat. She slashed out with her flaming sword and cut another skeleton warrior in two. At this moment, a skeleton warrior suddenly ambushed Shea from behind. Sister Shea, be careful. Kadena couldn't help but cry out. In her eyes, these skeletons were no longer useless skeletons. Each one of them could cause great trouble for Shea, so she couldn't help but warn her. Shea didn't even look. The silver-winged Pegasus retreated and kicked the skeleton warrior into the air. It crashed into a tree and turned into ash. Good kick. Kadena couldn't help but clap her hands. That despicable woman. Ron glared at Kadena. In a fair duel, this was considered unfair. Ron didn't have a good impression of Kadena either. Shea explained what man and horses won meant in front of Ron. She rode the silver-winged Pegasus up and down. Her sword and the Pegasus's legs dealt great damage to the skeleton warriors. The skeleton warriors were either cut into pieces by Shea's sword or sent flying by the Pegasus's kick. Damn it! Ron's eyes turned red. He was ready to fight for his life. Die! Ron gripped his bone spear and rode on his skeleton warrior, stabbing at Shea with all his might. Boom! The two of them clashed again. Their powerful strength clashed, causing beautiful sparks to erupt. The two of them went back and forth, fighting to their heart's content. Hamelin shook his head at the sight. Ridiculous! Ridiculous! How did this fight end up like this? This is a necromancer, not a warrior. Why did you rush up and fight her in melee? If you like melee, you could just train as a death knight. He thought to himself, but didn't say it out loud. Firstly, it would distract Ron. Secondly, it was just a spar anyway. It wouldn't hurt to let him suffer a little. The two of them were still fighting. The black aura on Ron's body grew thicker and thicker, as if he was shrouded in a black fog. The more one looked at him, the more unreal it seemed. At this time, Huamelin suddenly frowned and let out a soft sound, a trace of surprise appearing on his face. He discovered that Ron was unknowingly imitating Shea's fighting style. The only difference was that Shea was riding a silver-winged Pegasus, while Ron was riding a skeleton warrior. What surprised Hamelin was that the skeleton warrior under Ron seemed to be alive. Not only did it carry Ron around the battlefield, jumping up and down, it even cooperated with Ron's attacks. From time to time, it would kick, punch, stab, and so on. Shea was so frightened that her beautiful face turned pale and she screamed repeatedly. Good lad, he's a genius. I can't believe that he actually created such a way of fighting. Hamelin shook his head and smiled wryly. This lad doesn't properly learn the orthodox necromancy magic. He uses a lot of crooked methods. I don't know how he came up with such a fighting style, but it's so powerful. Could it be that necromancers are going to become a close combat profession in his hands? Hamelin wasn't opposed to innovation. He wasn't a conservative person, but he was a little worried about Ron's future growth. Shea, on the other hand, was getting more and more annoyed. That Ron was like a piece of dogskin plaster. Once stuck, it couldn't be removed. The most depressing thing was that she was clearly much stronger than him, but she couldn't gain the upper hand. It wasn't easy for her to figure out his fighting style, but he came up with a new fighting style, forcing her to be flustered. Stab! Shea took a deep breath. The sword in her hand split into three, like three sharp rays, and went straight for Ron. Ron didn't dare to be negligent. He summoned the bone shield to block the opponent's attacks one by one. After a long period of fighting, his reactions were much faster. Rise! Chapter 98. A cloud of dust rose from the ground, and when Ron turned around, Shea had already disappeared from her original spot. 56. Book Vault. Asterisk // in the sky. Ron quickly discovered Shea flying in the sky. She was riding the silver-winged Pegasus, shuttling through the air like a nimble fish. A smile appeared on Kadina's face. Sister Shea is flying in the sky again. With the advantage in the air, Ron's defeat is irreversible. I just don't know if a necromancer like him can fly. Shea's face was cold as frost. She rode the silver-winged Pegasus and circled in the air, her face cold. "Humph, I'll let you suffer a little." As she spoke, her hands suddenly sank, and the silver-winged Pegasus made a beautiful turn in the air and dived down towards Ron. Ron turned pale with fright, and his nerves tensed up. So fast, the silver-winged Pegasus carried a powerful momentum as it headed straight for the pornographic novel. It fell, and before it even landed, a gust of wind was already blowing on the ground. Not good, Dodge. Shea was very fast, and Ron only had time to think this. He steered the skeletal warrior and rolled on the ground. At this moment, he only felt a gust of wind blow past, and his face hurt. The skeletal warrior under him was cut in half at the waist. Ron was still in shock and broke out in a cold sweat. If he had dodged a little slower, he would have been the one cut in half. Count yourself lucky. Shea's attack missed. She swung her slim waist, and her slender legs squeezed the Pegasus's belly. A hurricane appeared on the silver-winged Pegasus's wings, and it rushed into the sky in the blink of an eye. At this time, Shea swooped down, turned back, and launched a fierce attack on Ron. Every time she swooped down, she posed a great threat. Ron could only stare at the silver-winged Pegasus in the sky, unable to do anything. Looks like Ron can't fly. He's definitely going to lose this time. Kadina tucked her hair behind her ears and revealed a victorious smile. Shea was her good sister. Kadina naturally didn't want her good sister to lose. Ron's mind was racing. What does this attack look like? That's right, it's Griffin. The Griffin Knight I met a few months ago had attacked me like that. How'd I deal with him that time? That's right. Skeleton Magician, you're dead for sure. From the beginning to the end, Homelin did not remind him to summon the Skeleton Mages. The Skeleton Mages had a long range and powerful magic, making them a great counter to aerial classes. Ron also knew this, but he was too nervous during the battle to remember it. A large amount of soul power crazily surged, and black chi filled the air. At this time, Ron's eyes were suffused with a green light. This was the sign of an extremely abundant soul power. Ron raised his bone staff and chanted in a low voice. A string of cryptic incantations flew out from his mouth. "Come out, Skeleton Magician. Use your powerful magic and give the enemy a hard-to-heal wound." Black soul power danced, and a powerful force suppressed the space. Even the space became distorted. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 skeleton magicians appeared in front of Ron. What's this?" Kadina tried her best to widen her beautiful eyes. Her long eyelashes flickered, showing a trace of interest in Ron. "So powerful. This is the third type of skeleton. It's completely different from the previous two types." The skeleton magicians that Ron summoned this time were wearing tattered magic robes. White bones could be seen under the tattered robes. They held short bone staffs in their hands and stood there in a daze, like soldiers waiting for orders. The first summoned skeleton is the weakest type. They're fast, but their defense is low. The second summoned skeleton is heavily armored. They move slowly, but they're quite resistant. They can even block Big Sister Shea's sword. However, the skeletons summoned this time don't seem to be of much use. Big Sister Shea will definitely win, Kadina thought to herself. In the air, Shea naturally saw this scene. She had a smile on her face. "No matter what kind of skeleton you summon, it's useless against me. My silver-winged Pegasus is extremely powerful in aerial combat. You can't fly, so you won't be able to attack me. Unless you're," Shea thought to herself. The skeleton magicians below suddenly moved. They raised their heads in unison, their eyes suffused with a faint green light. "Target sky. Attack." Ron ordered without hesitation. The skeleton magicians raised the bone staffs in their hands and aimed at Shea in the air. Large amounts of magical elements condensed continuously. In an instant, magic bullets rose into the air. What? Shea and Kadena were stunned. They just realized that Ron didn't summon warriors this time, but magicians. Impossible. How can those skeletons be magicians? Kadena was in disbelief. Whoosh, whoosh, boom, boom, boom. Magic bullets rose into the air one after another. Beautiful fireworks bloomed in the air, and half of the sky turned into a battlefield. Shea in the air was in a miserable state. Magic kept exploding around her. Fireballs and ice bullets kept greeting her body, making her suffer unspeakably. Shea clutched the reins of the silver-winged Pegasus tightly. Her heart was already in turmoil. Ron, what did he do? Summon a magic army? Amazing. Kadena stood up, forgetting herself. This is fireball spell, ice bullet spell, wind blade spell, thunder arrow. They're all anti-air magic. But these spells don't seem to be of a high level, and their power isn't great either. Shea also noticed this. The skeleton magicians summoned by the opponent could only release low-level magic. Although the scene was spectacular, their power wasn't great. This made her feel a little more at ease. Defensive stance. Shea pulled on the reins and did a beautiful turn in the air. A stream of fire covered her entire body, including her mount, the silver-winged Pegasus. Boom, boom, boom. Shea gritted her teeth. Braving Ron's bombardment of magic, she dove down and engaged in a fierce melee battle with the skeleton magicians. This time, the skeleton magicians' long-range advantage couldn't be exploited. Shea rushed into the group of skeleton magicians, killing them one by one with her sword. It was easier than chopping vegetables. Ron was dumbfounded. Although these skeleton magicians had strong attack power, their defense couldn't even compare to the most basic skeleton warriors. He could only watch as the small team of skeleton magicians he summoned was wiped out by Shea. Damn it, I won't let you have your way. Seeing that there were only 2 or 3 skeleton magicians left, Ron made his move. He steeled his heart and rode the skeleton warrior toward Shea. Holding a long-bone spear, he stabbed it at Shea. Shea glanced at Ron. In a flash, the silver-winged Pegasus flapped its wings and rushed into the air again. Damn it! Ron looked at Shea's back and gnashed his teeth. At this moment, he felt the ring in his hand move. A warm current replenished his body. Ron's mind suddenly shook, and he became clear-headed. He looked down at the soul ring in his hand and was overjoyed. This soul ring's ability was really too heaven-defying. In the blink of an eye, his soul energy was rapidly recovering. As his strength increased, the soul rings helped to him also increased. The battle continued. Ron and Shea fought for dozens of rounds. Neither side had the upper hand. In terms of strength, Shea, who was also a senior professional, was much stronger than Ron. Shea was at least level 8 warrior, while Ron was only level 2. The difference was very obvious. The reason why Ron had been entangled with Shea until now was inseparable from the combat level of his necromancy magic. Huff, huff, huff. Shea rode the silver-winged Pegasus and stood on the ground, her chest rising and falling rapidly. In reality, she had always had the upper hand. She used the silver-winged Pegasus aerial advantage to fight guerrilla warfare. Ron couldn't do anything about it, but it also consumed a lot of his strength. Ron was also slightly panting. Only now did he truly understand how powerful Shea was. Before coming, he had always disapproved of Shea's strength. That was because he remembered how Homelin defeated Shea and mistakenly thought that Shea was very weak. But now he understood that Shea's weakness was relative to Homelin. And to himself, Shea was like an unreachable mountain. Ron was lucky to dodge Shea's every attack. There were even a few times when he was almost defeated. This made him put away his contempt for Shea. The place where Ron and Shea fought was a mess. There were traces of destruction everywhere. There were also burning bushes. A few skeleton magicians stood proudly in the midst of the flames, the magic elements on the bone staffs in their hands constantly shining. Sigh, when are they going to stop fighting like this? Kadena had already stood up and anxiously watched everything. With her eyesight, she could naturally see that although Sister Shea had the upper hand in terms of strength, she couldn't do anything to Ron. Shea stared at Ron as if she wanted to kill him, as if she wanted to eat him alive. Ron couldn't help but look back at her weakly. Although the two sides had temporarily stopped fighting, they were both vigilant and unwilling to back down. Shea's heavy breathing gradually slowed down. Ron tightened his grip on the bone staff in his hand. He knew that this was a sign that the opponent was about to attack. At this moment, Shea suddenly smiled at him. She jumped off the silver-winged Pegasus and lightly patted its back. The silver-winged Pegasus emitted a ray of light and disappeared. Ron was stunned. He became even more vigilant. What do you want? He glanced at Kadena. Do you want to come and me together? He calculated in his mind. Just Shea alone was difficult enough to deal with. If that female magician joined in, he could only turn tail and run. Nothing. Shea smiled and put her one-handed knight's sword and shield into her space bag. I suddenly don't feel like fighting anymore. Ron's eyes widened. Don't feel like fighting anymore? Why? Beside him, Cardina also revealed a puzzled expression. Chapter 99. Ron widened his eyes in shock. In that instant, he felt insulted. What did you say? Shea said calmly. That's right. You become weaker. I've lost interest in you, so I've lost the meaning of challenging you. So I'm not going to fight anymore. Ron understood in his heart that he was indeed no match for Shea. Since the start of the battle, she had always been the one who had the upper hand. She was also the one who had been taking the initiative. Ron could only respond passively and bitterly hold on. Moreover, he did not know how long he could hold on. Kadena blinked her beautiful big eyes and looked at Shea in confusion. She thought, Ron is very strong. It would be very difficult for Sister Shea to defeat him. Why would she say that? Could it be that this Ron was stronger in the past? Even Sister Shea can't deal with him? Ron sighed. He naturally understood what Shea meant when she said he had become weaker. The one who had fought with Shea previously was not him, but his mentor Hamelin. Shea had always been chasing after Hamelin's shadow. Even though Ron's strength had improved a lot compared to the past, his strength was still not enough to gain Shea's recognition. As expected of a pornographic novel, he continued, I feel that the threat you give me is not as strong as before. I don't know if it's just my imagination. Now that you're standing in front of me, I don't feel even the slightest bit of fear. She shook her head. You're still the same person, but the difference in strength is too great. By the way, where's the Black Knight that you summoned? Ron was silent. He could not tell her about the existence of Hamelin's grandfather. As for the Black Knight, with his strength, he still could not summon it. Shea did not blame him. She shook her head. After seeing your strength, I've lost interest in challenging you. Even if I defeat you, it doesn't make me feel like I've washed away the shame. She waved her hand. That's it. If you become stronger in the future, perhaps I will come and find you again. But for now, I don't want to see you. Kadena, let's go. Shea said. Okay, Sister Shea. Kadena glanced at Ron and watched as Shea left. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on the two beauties, one big and one small, drawing out their long silhouettes. Phew! Ron took a deep breath as he watched the two leave. At this time, he turned his head and saw that Merlin's grandfather's soul had come out at some point. Grandpa Hamelin. Ron lowered his head in embarrassment. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I couldn't defeat her. Hamelin smiled. You've already done very well, Ron. This little girl's strength is much stronger than before. You've only learned necromancy magic for a few months. To be able to fight with her to this extent is already very impressive. Looking at Ron's somewhat defeated expression, Hamelin smiled and said earnestly, Ron, don't be anxious. You still have a long way to go to become a powerful person. In the process, the most important thing is to learn patience. Shea and Kadena walked side by side on a tree-lined path in the academy. Although Shea was 2 heads taller than Kadena, the two beauties walking together did not seem out of place. Sister Shea, why did you stop fighting? Kadena was the first to break the silence and asked, haven't you always wanted to wash away the shame of losing? Shea smiled sweetly and said indifferently, he's indeed very strong, but if I use all my strength, it's more than enough to defeat him. However, I suddenly don't want to fight anymore. There's no meaning in defeating the current him. The current him? Why? Shea muttered to herself for a moment. I don't know why either. I just feel that his strength has decreased greatly. He's not like the person who defeated me before. Kadena was astonished. You mean to say that the person who defeated you was another person? No. Shea shook her head. He was the one who defeated me before. There's no mistake. It's just that his strength has decreased so much that I'm puzzled. Kadena's eyes widened in surprise. So you're saying that he was even stronger before? That's impossible. He looks very young. Yes. Although I don't want to admit it, but that's the truth. Shea nodded her head. But this time when I saw him again, he was struggling under my attacks. I could tell that he had already used all his strength. But half a year ago, he wasn't like this. At that time, his strength was very strong. At the very least, he had surpassed the master level. He could deal with me effortlessly. At that time, I had a feeling that my life and death was in his hands. That kind of fear, even now when I think about it, I still feel fear. Shea's voice was trembling. That feeling was exactly the same as standing in front of the dean. Kadena was shocked. He's that strong? Shea nodded her head and said, in order to defeat him, I worked hard on my cultivation. In just half a year, my strength had increased by a lot. When I fought with him again, to be honest, I couldn't help but feel disappointed. Only then did I realize that his strength wasn't worth my effort. Perhaps due to some reason, his strength had decreased by quite a bit. Although this battle was very difficult for me, but I believed that with my strength, I would definitely be able to obtain victory. Shea smiled as she reached out her hand to brush away the hair on her forehead. But I suddenly felt that there was no meaning in defeating an opponent whose strength had decreased, so decided to give up. Shea smiled proudly. Although I don't know why his strength had decreased, but I've been waiting for the day when he regains his strength. At that time, I will personally challenge him and wash away the shame of my defeat. Oh, Kadena nodded her head. She finally understood what Shea was thinking about. She thought for a while before tilting her head and said, but Sister Shea, why do I feel that if you continue to fight, your chances of winning aren't very high? What do you mean? Shea turned around in confusion. I'm not sure, it's just a feeling. Kadena thought for a while and said, in the end, although you're strong, your strength has decreased by a lot. Although Ron's strength is much weaker than yours, his strength is very abundant. It seems like he hasn't used up much of his strength. Shea turned pale with fright and her eyes widened. There's such a thing? Ron opened the door of room 302 with a heavy heart. The dormitory was very quiet and there was no one around. After the incident in the morning, Kid, Terry, and the others had all gone to class. There's no class this afternoon. Now I can have a good rest. Ron's mood became relaxed. At this time, he was surprised to see something on the table. He walked closer to take a look and saw that it was a bowl of steaming hot noodles. I wonder whose noodles this is, Ron muttered to himself. Only then did he remember that he hadn't eaten anything yet. His stomach was growling with hunger. At this time, Ron was surprised to see a note on the table. He picked it up curiously and saw a line of fine words. Ron, this bowl of noodles is for you. I think you haven't eaten yet. So many things have happened today. I think you're tired. Have a good rest after this bowl of noodles. Aurora, please. Aurora, it's her. Seeing the signature, Ron thought of a familiar face. The image of Aurora standing in front of him with a bow and arrow in her hand was still vivid in his mind. To be honest, Aurora wasn't very beautiful. Her appearance was only average, and her figure wasn't even as good as Manny's. However, her strength was top-notch. If she hadn't injured the tutor and been sent to the trashy room 302, with her strength, She would have been a shining star in any dormitory. Ron was touched. Since it's her idea, I'll eat it. If I don't, it won't be good if she gets angry. Ron sat down and took the spoon, knife, and fork. He picked up the noodles with one hand and stuffed them into his mouth, wolfing them down. He had to admit that Aurora's cooking wasn't bad. At least the food she made wasn't bad. Aurora's bowl of noodles was light and watery. There wasn't even a speck of meat on it. Ron wasn't used to it, but he heard from Fatty Jita that Aurora didn't eat meat. Katja! The door to room 302 opened. Jita, Lantry, Karachi, and Manny walked in, laughing and talking. Lantry said, "Second, fifth brother, come on, let's fight another 300 rounds. This time, I'll make you lose so badly that you lose your pants." As soon as he heard the bet, Jita's eyes lit up. Who's afraid of who? When the time comes, who knows who will lose and have to lose their pants? Jita looked around and saw Ron eating noodles. He greeted him and said, "Hey, Ron, you're back too?" "Yeah. I just came back," Ron said vaguely as he swallowed the last mouthful of noodles. At this time, Jita came over and winked. "By the way, that beauty Shea didn't make things difficult for you, did she?" Ron stood up, wiped his mouth, and said with a smile, "It's nothing. I just talked for a while and came back. She didn't make things difficult for me." Ron didn't want to tell the truth and make his roommates worry. At this time, Karachi said with a smile, "Ron, you're really impressive today. You actually attracted the attention of the two bosses in the academy. One of them even took special care of you." Her eyes were filled with envy. "Tell me, how did you meet Boss Shea?" "Took special care?" When Ron heard this word, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Shea had called him to fight, and it looked like she was going to kill him. Was this considered taking special care? However, he still shrugged his shoulders and said with a laugh, I don't know. Who are you trying to fool?" Karachi sniffed in dissatisfaction and smiled playfully. She grabbed Ron's hand and said coquettishly, "Brother Ron, when will you take care of me with Sister Shea? Even if it's just a few words, I won't be bullied in the academy anymore. There are people bullying you in the academy?" Ron was a little surprised and widened his eyes. Karachi nodded sadly. She was weak and was looked down upon. Being bullied in the academy was a common occurrence. However, if she had Shea's care, it would be different. No one would dare to bully her. Of course, the premise was that she had to keep a low profile. If she liked to be in the limelight and had no strength, she would be courting death. Ron smiled. "This is a bit difficult. Although I know her, I'm not familiar with her. This request, I'm afraid it's difficult to fulfill." How could Karachi not understand the meaning of Ron's excuse? She moved her body closer and started to act coquettishly. She said in a coquettish voice, "Okay, Brother Ron, promise me. Karachi hasn't begged you yet. I'll beg you once, just once." Chapter 100. At this time, Manny interrupted with a smile. "Ron, just promise Karachi. Boss Shea is willing to stand up for you, which at least proves that she thinks highly of you. If you pull some strings and let Karachi recognize Shea as her sister, no one in Love Axe Academy would dare to bully her. This." Ron could not help but hesitate, but when he saw Karachi's pleading eyes, his heart softened. He sighed. "Okay, I'll try. If it doesn't work, then don't blame me." Karachi's face was full of smiles. She said excitedly, "I knew it. Big Brother Ron is a kind-hearted person. If I tell you, you will definitely help me." Lantry also came over, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Ron, thank you." He sighed. Karachi doesn't have a good life in the academy. Many of her classmates bully her. As you know, I'm useless as her brother. There's nothing I can do to help her. Ron could not help but feel sad. He glanced at Karachi, whose eyes had unknowingly overflowed with tears. She clenched her teeth and gently tugged at the corner of Lantry's shirt. Ron sighed in his heart. The world of the weak was indeed pitiful. Those who were not in the lower class naturally would not understand the suffering of the lower class. In the eyes of ordinary people, Karachi, a 14 or 15-year-old girl, was a high and mighty existence. The profession of magician was the dream of many ordinary people. Ron had envied her before, but now it seemed that Karachi, who was an unattainable magician in the eyes of ordinary people, was an extremely lowly existence in the academy where the strong were as common as clouds. She was bullied everywhere. I'll try my best. Ron decided to help her. At this time, Kid came over and smiled mischievously. Brother, tell me the truth. How did you hook up with a beauty like Shea? Boss Shea, hee hee. She has a great figure and is powerful. I've been following you since before. Just as most people understood, fatties were more or less lecherous, and Jita was no exception. His family was rich, and what he liked the most was to pick up girls. With his easygoing personality and a mouth that could coax people to death, he had already hooked up with countless seniors and juniors. Unfortunately, he did not last long with any of them. The most common sentence for the fat guy's mouth was F***CK. I'm out of love again. Ron did not know whether to laugh or cry. What was going on? Suddenly, Kid's expression, as if he had seen something extremely terrifying. Second, fifth brother, what's wrong? Ron, this bowl. Kid pointed at Ron's bowl and couldn't say anything. His voice was trembling. This bowl, what's wrong with this bowl? Ron turned the bowl over and over again, but he could not see anything wrong with it. However, he suddenly realized that everyone's expressions had changed. Ron asked, what's going on? What's wrong with you guys? Karachi stuttered. Brother Ron, did you take the wrong bowl? This bowl is boss's boss. Ron thought for a while and realized that she was talking about Aurora. Oh, it's Aurora's bowl, right? Yes. So what? Lantry and his sister looked at each other and said guiltily, Boss Aurora is a bit of a snob. If she finds out that you used her bowl to eat, I'm afraid she'll immediately go crazy. Ron was shocked. No way. Is it that serious? Yes. The four of them nodded in unison. But this was approved by Aurora, Ron said as he passed the note on the table to them. Jita took it and looked at it. His eyes widened and he looked incredulous. This was really written by her? Ron nodded. It's her handwriting, Manny said. At this moment, the four of them raised their heads and stared at Ron. Lantry said, Ron, you're rich. Karachi said, yeah, I didn't think that Boss Aurora, who's usually so cold, would actually like you. Jita laughed heartlessly. Could this be the legendary one hug? He was referring to the time when Ron hugged Aurora in front of everyone. Pornographic novel? Is this necessary? Ron was sweating profusely. A promise of love? What was this? Didn't he just use her bowl to eat noodles? He could just wash it clean and return it to her. Of course, Ron didn't have the concept of hygiene. As a little beggar, he naturally wouldn't understand the purity of some people. To him, as long as he could fill his stomach, he didn't care if it was hygienic or not. Manny covered her mouth. Aurora gave her bowl to you. This is already very obvious. Lantry sighed. I didn't think that Boss Aurora would like you so quickly. To be honest, you're really lucky. He had always had a crush on Aurora, but he didn't have the courage or the ability to say it out loud. To say the word love, not only did it have to be said, it had to be done, and it also needed the ability. Lantry knew his own limitations. He was too far away from Aurora in terms of ability. He couldn't reach her. Moreover, he didn't think that Aurora was interested in him. He waved his hand generously. Brother, I won't say anything else. I just want to say that I wish you all the best. Ron didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What do you mean? I'm back. Just as they were talking, the door to room 302 opened. Aurora walked in with a smile on her face. She was humming an unknown tune. You're all here. Why are you all so obedient today? You came back right after school? Ron, you're back too? She was surprised to see that Ron was unharmed. What's wrong? Ron, did that woman make things difficult for you? You don't look like you're hurt. Ron was a little touched. It's nothing. I just wanted to talk to her about something. There's no fighting or killing, as if. Ron thought to himself, but he didn't say the second half of the sentence. Oh, so that's what happened. Aurora nodded. She looked at everyone who was stunned. Then, her gaze fell on the empty bowl on the table. She said happily, Ron, you finished the noodles I made? Ron nodded and said embarrassedly, "Sorry, I didn't know it was your bowl." "It's okay." Aurora was a little embarrassed. She blushed. Of course, she did it on purpose. Otherwise, who would dare to touch her bowl in room 302? She was very powerful when she was angry. Jita, Lantry, Karachi, Manny, and the others had never seen Aurora so bashful before. They were all stunned. Jita pulled the fat on his face until it hurt. "I say, are we dreaming? How did Boss Aurora, who has always been strong, become like this?" Manny was also stunned. "She does look like her." Aurora's face turned serious. "What are you all talking about? Get the hell back to your rooms." Yes. Since the boss had spoken, no one in room 302 dared to disobey. All of them returned to their respective dorms dejectedly. Among them, Kid was still loyal. He mouthed something, and Ron understood it. It meant that the boss was angry, and Ron was on his own. Aurora chased them back to their rooms. Only Ron and Aurora were left in the common hall. The two of them looked at each other and lowered their heads. The atmosphere was a little awkward. After a long time, Aurora laughed. "You're nervous. What are you afraid of?" Ron thought for a moment. "Nothing. They described you as scary." "I'm just a little nervous." Aurora leaned closer to Ron and said with a smile, "So, you're afraid of me?" "I used to be." Ron nodded honestly. "But I'm not anymore." Aurora asked, "Why?" Ron smiled. "Because I ate your noodles." Heefles was pacing back and forth in a leisure hall in a high-class apartment in the Balavax Academy. His beautiful wife, the senior priest Misoya, sat beside Heefles quietly. Her eyes were cold and arrogant. "Brother, I can't just let it go. Ron is too despicable." Heefles' younger brother, Heefles, said indignantly. He was not injured, and after Misoya's treatment, he immediately recovered. Now he was alive and kicking. The first thing he wanted was to take revenge on Ron. Highfeld glared at his younger brother in dissatisfaction. He was angry at his younger brother's incompetence. He had actually lost to a mere necromancer. This news had already spread, and many people were laughing their heads off. "Revenge, revenge. Do you think I don't want revenge?" Heefles raised his voice an octave. "But do you know who jumped out to protect this kid today?" "Who?" Firth's eyes widened. He had just woken up and had not heard of this. "Shea," Heefles said coldly. "Shea?" Firth's eyes widened in shock when he heard this name. He was no stranger to Shea, the most popular person in the academy and one of the top 10 beauties in the academy. Firth's body trembled. He was someone who bullied the weak and feared the strong. It was because of his brother Heefles' prestige that he dared to act like a tyrant in the academy. Big brother. This Shea. Firth's confidence was shaky. Heefles glared at him. "Don't worry. With me here, Shea won't dare to touch you. As for Ron," Heefles muttered to himself as he fell into deep thought. After a while, he raised his head with an ominous glint in his eyes. "As for Ron, I definitely won't let him off, but now is not the time." Hearing that his brother would not ignore this matter, Firth's relief was obvious. He immediately asked, "Then when is the time?" Chapter 101. After the incident with High Firth, Ron's life quickly became peaceful, but this peace was brought about by Shea. In the academy, basically everyone knew that Boss Shaya of the senior elite class had stood up for Ron and clashed with Heefles. In the end, Shaya's side had won, and Heefles had retreated in the face of difficulties, becoming the laughingstock of the entire academy. But what was surprising was that Ron's popularity had also risen. Almost all the freshmen in the school knew him. Many of them smiled knowingly when they saw his unique and beautiful necromancer robe. "Hello, Ron." A new student greeted Ron on the way to the library, his smile full of flattery. "Hello." Ron smiled and nodded. This kind of thing happened every day, and it made him feel somewhat helpless and uneasy. He was originally just an ordinary student, and his profession was the trashiest necromancer. People like him should have been forgotten in a corner of the academy, but he had inadvertently become the focus of everyone's attention. Stepping into the most ancient and magnificent building in the academy, Ballarak's Academy Comprehensive Library. Ron couldn't help but feel a surge of emotion when he saw the golden words. As long as he didn't have classes, he would always appear here and stay for a few hours, eagerly reading the books here. The Ballarak's Academy's library had some history, and its collection was extremely rich. It was said that even the Roland Empire's Imperial Library couldn't compare. Rows of hardcover books filled the shelves, and it was an eye-opener for Ron. There were all kinds of books here, covering all kinds of professions and races. Even long-lost professions and races had appeared on the shelves, becoming beautiful legends. Compared to other places, the Ballarak's Academy's magic collection was the most abundant. There are different interpretations of the same type of magic, and they explored the mysteries of magic from different angles. For example, how to master the fire element, 100 questions on water magic, and so on. Even manuscripts and notes of famous magicians could be found here. It could be said that this was the richest magic treasury in the entire continent. Student ID. Ron had just stepped into the library's second floor when a serious-looking old man stopped him. The management of the library was extremely strict, and all students who borrowed and returned books had to register. Some books couldn't even be taken away and could only be read here. Ron stood still, took out his student ID card from his space bag, and handed it over obediently. The old man from the academy casually glanced at it. Necromancer. Ron? He muttered a few words and returned the student ID to Ron. He even looked at him curiously. After all, there weren't many people studying necromancy nowadays, and no fool would pay such a high tuition fee to study necromancy here. Ron took it with a smile and walked in. Looking at the neat rows of books, he was stunned. He didn't know which one to take. Let's read books on nights today. At this time, Homelin spoke. You've already read a lot of books on magic in the past few days. Homelin required Ron to read extensively. In addition to studying necromancy, he also needed to grasp the basic information of various professions. He needed to know how they cultivated, what their cultivation methods were, and how this profession gradually evolved in the long river of history. In Homelin's eyes, this was all knowledge that he had to understand. An attitude that didn't seek a thorough understanding of learning was absolutely unacceptable. Yes, Grandpa Homelin. Ron responded and reached out to take a book called Overview of Nights. As soon as he opened it, he was attracted by the contents. He stood motionless and read with great interest. He stood like this for an unknown period of time. He didn't know that there was a pair of eyes staring at him from behind, but he was completely unaware. Shea and Kadena hid behind rows of bookshelves, secretly watching Ron. Isn't that Ron? Noises were not allowed in the library, nor were they allowed to speak loudly. The blue-haired Kadena could only point at Ron's back as she spoke to Shea. Shea frowned slightly and faintly said, "Oh," and didn't say anything else. Kadena smiled. Sister Shea, it seems that Ron is very popular now. Have you heard? He's been selected as one of the top 10 influential freshmen. Top 10 influential freshmen. Hearing this, Shea couldn't help but laugh involuntarily. With his strength, he deserves it. As for the other 9, they're all people who can't be brought to the stage. In terms of strength, they are too far apart from him. Heh, that's true. Kadena smiled lightly. If we're talking about Ron's strength, it's really shocking. I never thought that a necromancer's strength could be so strong. I really don't know how he cultivates. I dare say that other than us, many people in the academy don't know about pornographic novels. I really want to see their faces when they find out about Ron's true strength. Shea's face revealed a smile. He does have a lot of secrets on him. For example, his powerful necromancy magic is different from the necromancers that we know. In addition, his strength suddenly declined, which also makes me very puzzled. You don't want to find out about his secrets? Kadena's face revealed a sly smile. Her gaze towards Ron was also full of interest. Shea smiled and tapped her forehead. If you want to go, then go. Everyone has their own secrets. I'm not interested in finding out. Besides, he's not anyone to me. Kadena smiled. You still say you're not anyone to me. Do you know? The rumors in the academy are getting more and more powerful. Shea's face reddened. She naturally knew that the matter back then had spread all over the city. Even she herself didn't know why she had stood up at that time. She hurriedly asked, "What are they talking about?" "Everything." Kadena pursed her lips and smiled. "There are even rumors that you've fallen in love with him." "Impossible." Shea vehemently denied it. However, she couldn't justify her actions back then. "I only wanted to take revenge on him." "Oh." Kadena deliberately dragged out her voice and looked meaningfully at Shea. "Now, it's because of this matter that he's extremely popular among the new students." "Wow, you're making fun of me." Shea blushed and reached out to tickle Kadena. Kadena smiled and dodged. The library corridor was filled with the crisp laughter of the two beauties. Quiet. At this time, a dignified voice came from afar. An old man stared at the two of them and solemnly said, "No noise in the library. Sorry." Shea and Kadena stuck out their tongues and made a face. The old man shook his head and left. Ron was immersed in the sea of knowledge and didn't look back. Naturally, he didn't notice them. Although Hamelin noticed, he was too lazy to remind Ron. Until the sun set in the west, the old man in charge of the library reminded him several times. Only then did Ron reluctantly put down the book in his hand and walked out of the library door. On the way back to dorm 302, the new students greeted him as usual. Ron only nodded indifferently. He was already numb to it. "Our boss Ron is a genuine powerhouse." He shouted loudly and waved the bone staff in his hand. He tripped Firth to the ground. He had stood up proudly and imitated Ron. He held a dagger in his hand and snorted, Firth, you lost." Around Fatty Gid, a group of freshmen were intoxicated by his words. When Ron walked into the dormitory, he happened to see this scene. "Second, fifth brother, what are you guys doing?" Ron asked curiously. Boss Ron, you're back." Boss Ron." All the new students in the room stood up with fervent expressions on their faces. In their eyes, Necromancer Ron was an important person that Boss Shea took care of. Naturally, they had to curry favor with him. Otherwise, if they offended Boss Shea, they wouldn't be able to stay in the Balarax Academy. Ron frowned. "I've said it many times. I'm just an ordinary student. I don't want to be some boss." Saying this, he glanced at Gid. "Second, fifth brother, are you telling stories again?" Gid laughed mischievously. "I'm telling you about Boss Ron's glorious deeds." Ron sweated profusely. He thought to himself, "Even if you want to tell me something, don't exaggerate it too much." He frowned and said, "I'm a little tired today." "You guys," he was about to ask the people in the room to leave, but he didn't know what to say, but Kid smiled and said, "Boss Ron needs to rest. You guys can leave now." It had to be said that although the fatty's strength wasn't much, his charisma was top-notch. After hearing this, the new students all left. "Second, fifth brother, I've already said that I don't want to be some boss. Besides, I don't have the ability or strength to do so. If a new student like me is called boss, I'll be laughed at. It'll be troublesome if others don't like me." The fatty sat down on the sofa and crossed his legs. He smiled disapprovingly. "Ron, you're too careful. What's wrong with being a boss? You can call the wind and summon the rain in the academy. You'll have a lot of underlings following you. Even when you go to the toilet, there will be people guarding you. How impressive is that?" Ron thought for a moment. "It's good, but I'm worried about my strength. There are so many strong people in the academy. Wouldn't I be courting death if I stood out?" Ever since he lost to Shea, Ron knew his own strength. Compared to other strong people, Ron's strength was far too lacking. What's there to worry about? The fatty waved his hand and interrupted Ron's words. He continued, "I know that you're not strong enough, Ron, but don't worry. Don't you have Boss Shea backing you? Even he-fools can't touch you. There aren't many people in the academy who would dare to touch you." But Ron still wanted to say something. However, he was interrupted by the fatty again. He smiled mysteriously. "Ron, do you know why you want to be the boss? Why are some of the new students willing to admit that you're the boss?" Ron was stunned and shook his head. Chapter 102. Inside an ordinary classroom in the Balarax Academy. Boom, boom, boom. Pornographic novels. Dazzling lights were emitted from the classroom, accompanied by intense explosions. After a long time, the explosions finally stopped. The classroom was a mess. The walls were scorched black, as if they had been burned by fire. The desks in the classroom had fallen to the ground, and some small flames had not yet been extinguished, barely burning. The entire classroom looked as if it had gone through a great battle. In the middle of the classroom stood a group of students. There were about 10 of them, and they were all seniors. The leader was Fresno. In front of them lay a large group of freshmen. They were covered in wounds after the great battle, and they were weakly groaning on the ground. These freshmen are so weak that it's pitiful, a senior standing beside Fresno said with a smile. With such strength, they actually dare to fight us. They really don't know what's good for them. Don't you think so, Boss Fresno? The senior pointed at the freshman on the ground and said to Fresno. Fresno was submissive in front of he-fools, but in front of the other seniors, he was awe-inspiring. Strength, that's right. Only strength could obtain respect. Fresno's strength could not compare to he-fools, but in front of the other seniors, he was a first-class powerhouse. His strength was at least at the advanced stage for realm. Fresno chuckled and put his magic staff back into his spatial bag. He said with a smile, "Not bad. It looks like this year's newcomer king, the Tajik brothers, is only SOSO. This kind of strength is really disappointing. It looks like the rumors can't be trusted." The two freshmen lying on the ground were Tajik and Tanak. They were both mages. The eldest Tajik was a water mage, while the second Tanak was a fire mage. Their strength had reached the first stage of the advanced magician realm. Among the freshmen, they could be considered to be among the strongest. The Tajik brothers had a very high prestige among the freshmen. They quickly gathered a group of people and became the boss themselves. Even the seniors did not respect them. Because they had the strength of a senior, ordinary seniors were not their opponents. It should be known that the strength of most of the seniors was at the intermediate level. There were relatively few seniors who had the strength of a senior like Shea and Hefels, who were at the peak of a senior, were even rarer. The Tajik brothers were lying on the cold ground. Their faces were swollen like pig heads, and they groaned from time to time. It seemed that they had been badly beaten. A senior student approached Tajik with a smile and kicked him. Get up, get up. Aren't you brothers the best at fighting? Why are you lying on your stomach like a dog?" As he spoke, he grabbed Tajik's hair and lifted him up. He laughed and said, "Hey, Tajik, I haven't done anything yet. You just collapsed. How boring." That senior student was at the peak of an intermediate level. He was far weaker than the Tajik brothers. If he were to face the Tajik brothers alone, he would probably wet his pants. However, with Fresno around, he immediately took advantage of the situation. Tajik's pig-like face was full of bruises. He forced his eyes open. This group of people had asked them to submit to the senior Hefels the moment they arrived, and from then on, they would listen to their orders. The unruly Tajik brothers naturally did not comply. They started fighting without saying a word. Although there were more than 100 freshmen, most of them were at the level of a novice. A few of them were at the beginner level. They were no match for a group of seniors who were at least at the intermediate level. They were quickly beaten into a mess. Although the Tajik brothers were strong, they were helpless against the stronger and more experienced Fresno. They were quickly defeated. Their magic was exhausted, and they were beaten into a pulp. This group of people was very heavy-handed, and all the freshmen were seriously injured. Looking at the senior student, Tajik's eyes were bloodshot. Fresno coughed and quickly admitted defeat. His skills were inferior, so what else could he say? He groaned and stuttered. What do you want to do? What do we want?" Fresno smiled. "Our boss Hefels wants to unify the Balarax Academy and become the boss of the entire Balarax Academy. Those who do not submit will end up like you, becoming boss Hefels' stepping stones." Tajik laughed with difficulty. "So, it's Hefels. We brothers admit that we are no match for him, but he wants to be the Academy's boss in his dreams." Fresno's face darkened. "Boss's strength is not something you can talk about. Tell me frankly, what is your choice? Do you submit or not. F*CK. Tajik's younger brother, Tajik, crawled up and spat out a mouthful of bloody phlegm. He cursed, Frazino, so what if we don't submit? Beat us to death if you dare. The senior beside Frazino was enraged. He laughed sinisterly and said, Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. As he spoke, his fist glowed with aqua-blue ripples. He was about to punch out. Stop! Frazino stopped him and smiled. Stop fighting. If you continue, they will really die. We are students of the academy. We can fight, but we can't kill. The senior student resentfully stopped his hand. Frazino glanced at Tajik and smiled faintly. Brother Tajik, since you don't submit, I have nothing to say. I hope you know what's best for you. Tajik's heart sank when he heard that. He understood the meaning of know what's best for you. This did not mean that this group of people would let them go, but that they would come back after their injuries were healed. They would beat them until they submitted and acknowledged Hefels as their boss. Frazino smiled and walked closer. He squatted down and lifted Tajik's chin with one hand. Tajik, you are a smart person. You should know what to choose. Let's go. Frazino stood up and looked back at the people in the room with disdain. He turned and left. Boss Tajik, this group of people is too abominable. We definitely can't submit to them. A freshman got up and wiped the blood off his face full of anger. That's right, brother. If we really submit to them, I won't be able to take it lying down. The younger brother, Tajik, sat up and was indignant. They were twins and looked very similar. Sigh. Tajik sighed, his sigh full of helplessness towards his own strength. They had always been shrouded in the halo of geniuses in their family. They had become adept mages at the age of 17, but there were too many such geniuses in the Balarax Academy. He shook his head. Tajik, it's useless. They will keep coming and beating us until we submit. These words caused all the new students to fall silent. That's right. Without strength, one would only be bullied by others. Although they wouldn't kill, how could the new students here endure this kind of physical pain? Moreover, this was a double humiliation, physical and psychological. Again and again, the strong sense of failure would cause these freshmen to fall into depression. Does the academy not care about this? A freshman timidly asked. Tajik shook his head. As far as I know, as long as they don't kill people, the academy doesn't care. They even connive at the students fighting each other. Tajik was stunned. So, unless our strength increases greatly, we have no choice. Yes, Tajik said resolutely. He lightly spat out, Transfer. Transfer? Tajik smiled. Transfer to where? Soaring Dragon Academy? Isn't that the same? Tajik buried his head between his knees. Let the priests treat the injured brothers first. I'll think about the rest carefully. From that day onwards, the Balarax Academy, which had been peaceful for a long time, was once again in turmoil. Sounds of fighting could be heard everywhere in the academy. Heifel had begun to move, and his naked ambitions were exposed to all the students. It wasn't only the freshmen who were beaten. Some of the older students couldn't stand it either. They were all bosses who dominated a region. Senior Kimmy was seriously injured. He's currently being treated in the academy's treatment room. Senior Etwies was seriously injured. I heard that Hefels personally took action. What's that? He was beaten half to death by Frazino. Everyone in the academy was in a state of panic. Whether it was the older students or the freshmen, they were all worried that Hefels' men would appear in front of them at any time and force them to submit. If they said no, they would immediately start fighting. Many of the freshmen had no choice, and the wiser older students tactfully made the right choice. God Eli strolled along the tree-lined path of the Balarax Academy. She had a magic book under her arm that she had borrowed from the academy's library. She was excitedly rushing back. You're God Eli, right? At this moment, an unfriendly voice appeared and stopped her. It was a girl with fiery red hair. In addition to her, there were a few people who looked like seniors surrounding her in a semicircle. God Eli became vigilant. She took a step back and asked, "Who are you?" The girl with fiery red hair sized God Eli up and smiled proudly. You're only 13 years old. yet you're already so seductive. Looks like you're the real deal. I'm Shalot, the red-haired girl said. What do you want? Shalot had long been unhappy with God Eli. She knew that High Firth liked God Eli very much and had come to cause trouble. She smiled and reprimanded. God Eli, how dare you snatch High Firth from me? Seniors, give her a good beating and help me vent my anger. Okay. A few older girls who didn't look very good rolled up their sleeves. Their bodies emitted all kinds of elemental power. They had different professions, such as warriors, mages, thieves, and so on. Shalot gave the order and approached murderously. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.